Hello there, it's Future Sean here, and just so you don't think we've completely lost what little of the plot we had left, just wanted to pop in and just let you know that this was recorded way before the recent batch of shows that went out. So the continuity's out, we talk about our long break and why we've been away for so long, and obviously that's not quite true because we have had quite a few shows come out recently, but yeah, just wanted to let you know so you don't think we've gone mad. Alright, take care and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the long-awaited episode 100 of the Game Pit. I'm Sean and here's Ronan.
Long awaited on many fronts, Sean. Long awaited both in the fact we haven't had an episode out forever, and long awaited because it's really our episode 115 or something along those lines. But before any more ado, we have been missing for a few weeks. There are some reasons behind this, mostly all positive. But firstly and foremostly, congratulations to Natalie and Sean on the birth of your second son, Thomas.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, he's quite the trial so far. God bless him.
Sean's first son was an angel sent from heaven, which I'm not sure he fully appreciated until Thomas turned up.
No, I thought he was quite a difficult child, and then I realised what a difficult child is.
Difficult or just constantly hungry?
Constantly hungry. He has like two modes, sleep and hungry. So pretty much like myself.
Daddy's boy.
Yes.
So that is a large part of our hiatus. But if you listened previous to this episode, you knew that we were planning ahead for that and that there was episodes in the works and I was going to have guest co-hosts on and do a solo episode and all the rest of it. And that also went out the window, Sean. I got an unexpected chance to train for a promotion to cover up at work, which was an 8-week-long course, which was pretty intense. The last 3 fellas who went for it all failed it. So that took 100% of my efforts over the last 8 weeks. And it all turned up well in the end, but the Game Pit has been the part of our lives to suffer from our busyness recently.
Yeah, and we've also had a loss in the family, so there's been running off to Ireland for that involved, and yeah, it's been a very, very busy time, and as we say, we don't do this for any sort of money. We do have full-time jobs and life sometimes takes over. So we do apologise. It has been a bit of a longer hiatus than we intended, but we're back. We hope to stay back for a little while, Ronan. So
in some sort of fashion.
We need to
work out our lives to play some games before we can claim to really be back.
Yeah.
The game playing has disappeared. I've been to LobsterCon in the interim, to LobsterCon 15, had a great 4 days there, played a few games. Outside of that convention, the games are down to maybe 1 or 2 plays a week when I get a chance. It hasn't been fantastic on that front, Sean. So we need to generate some content before we can promise too many more episodes on the horizon.
Yeah, we've got a couple of episodes in the making. We do have some games that we had all set to review anyway from before I had the baby. We've also got the run-up to the UK Games Expo to prepare for, so lots of games there's going to be coming out there and demoing there, so it's a lot for us to maybe do a treasure hunt episode. And things I think are settling down for both of us now a little bit, so hopefully we will get back into the groove, so to speak.
And our big review of 2017.
And of course, our big review of 2017, Ronan. Yeah, so I don't have to do too much prep for that either. So, yeah, we have got a few episodes in the offing.
Hopefully. And maybe even some pit stop videos will start flowing again, because everything ground to a halt. But we'll see. Anyway, that's not what you're here for today. You're here to listen to our episode 100, which is... Sean has been the creator of this episode and he's put it together, so I'll let him introduce what sort of thing you're going to be hearing over the next couple of hours.
So no, that's him firmly putting the blame on me.
Oh, there was a bus coming and you had to go under it. Where you go?
So one of the things we did was we asked people to write in, email in, whatever you, with their questions. So we've got plenty of questions. We've also got a few clips from some gaming luminaries that you may or may not have heard of before, just give it a little soundbite for us. And we're also just going to look back at our first episode and at some of the games that we've reviewed over the time, and generally our time doing the Game Pit, how we got into it, why we did it, etc. So just a pat on the back for us, really. And probably look back and think, why did we do it?
The whole pat on the back idea. That's why Sean's in charge of this one, because, Anyway. Shall we just crack on with this, Sean, and have our first guest give us a quite confused soundbite?
Let's do that. And as always, we are proud members of the Dice Tower Network. Go to the Dice Tower Network and the Dice Tower itself for gaming goodness galore. If you wish to download the episodes, we're on Stitcher, iTunes, and Podbean. And of course, we do have our YouTube channel where there will be some pit stop videos, I promise, in the near future.
Hey, Pauline, what's the next one I got to do? The next recording? Who? The Game Pit? Sean and Ronan? Yeah, all right, whatever. All right, let me just throw something out there. Okay, all right. Hey, Sean, Ronan, my best friends in the industry. You guys rock. Congratulations on 100 episodes. Major milestone. This is Stephen Bonacore, Stronghold Games. You know how much I love you. You guys are the best. Sean and Ronan, the Game Pit, 100 episodes. Congratulations, guys. Big time. You're the best out there. Yeah, well, I'm sure they'll believe that one.
Well, that was a little bit too close to home for Mr. Bonacore there. I don't know if any of you remember the episode in which it was me and him prior to Essen 2016. At the end of it, he said, that was loads of fun, and you'd done your homework. You really knew a lot about our game and stuff. I'm really impressed. Oh, thanks, Stephen. Thanks a lot. I think it went well. You guys should apply to be on the Dice Tower Network. Yeah, we've been on there for 3.5 years, mate, but thanks for never hearing of us. It's just the constant response we get when we talk to people. You guys, we're on the Dice Tower Network. Are you? Really? Yeah, well, Okay.
Yeah, somewhere down the bottom.
Stephen, that hurt a little bit too much. Sean, take it away.
Okay. I think he knows who we are. I think he does. Anyway, okay, so the first section here is all about our journey. It's how we started the Game Pit, why we started the Game Pit, and I think it boils down to, Ronan, that we talked for years after listening to various podcasts, and we would always sit there and just talk about, I think we could do that. And there are some fantastic ones that I'm just like, no, we can't, we'll never be that good, but there were some that we were like, yeah, I think we could do that.
Just name them. Just go for
Name and shame.
Just be really negative.
What was the one that Lloyd used to be in?
The Royal Society of Gamers. Yeah, we know them. We can say that one. I think it started before that, Sean. I think you've known each other for 39 years. I'd probably started as soon as I could talk, because we've just always, whether it be on the phone or sitting down on a couch or lounging around the place, watching music videos, putting the world to rights, we've always talked to each other for ages about stuff, about rugby or football or films or TV or books or games when we got into them. And in essence, we were just talking a podcast in our own conversations between each other. And I think that sort of inspired, and he sort of went, well, we talk to each other for hours on end anyway. Why don't we just record some of it, preferably the better bits and the cleaner bits, and just put it out there and see what happens.
So we didn't quite meet that aspiration to put the better bits out, but
they are the better bits of our conversation. They're not the better bits of what can be found out there. So it was, again, and that's the second bus has come along after the first one. It was fully your idea, Sean. What inspired you?
It was just that, Ronan. It was listening to the likes of Tom Vassell and Eric on the Dice Tower podcast and the Secret Cabal, and I'm just thinking these guys they're friends. They're chatting to each other like friends. They've got that sort of camaraderie. And, like, I've got an idiot that I know that I'm very friendly with. So why don't we get together, see what happens?
Who was that idiot? Was he not available?
No, he wasn't. So I chose you.
Oh, that was nice. Thanks.
It was nice of you to step in. I mean, obviously not the first choice, but well done, you. Then it kind of dawned on us, Ronan, like, how do we get this bad boy started? Like, how does it happen? How does it just materialise? We started off with some very ropey equipment, didn't we?
Well, we kind of said, let's get a couple of cheap headsets, 10 or 15 quid each. Turned out that Audacity was free or great, and we'll put something out. And if we started in the March, and we said, if we have 100 listeners by the end of the year, that'll be fantastic, and we'll just carry on going, and that's grand for us. So we just started off cheap and cheerful with not a clue what we were doing. 12 hours editing that first episode for about 65 minutes of content.
Yeah, it's bad. You don't realise how much you actually say and ah and and e. When you're editing, it's like, well, why don't I notice this? How is this not noticeable in everyday life?
Every podcaster's favourite. Before you start a sentence. And then you do this. And then I did that. And then I about 300 times.
And then we got a bit anal about it and we really over-edited for a little while and everything was like super clean and we did this.
We didn't leave any breath pauses either.
No.
So everything was talking about like that and we're gonna whack it. Oh yeah. There are some interesting episodes floating around out there. Don't bother looking for them.
No, especially not number 2. Number 2 was the worst.
That's your favourite thing to talk about, is it?
It is my favourite thing to talk about. When we applied to join the Dice Tower, when I previously applied to join the Dice Tower.
After we've been doing this for 7 minutes.
Yeah, literally 7 minutes. Right, first podcast is about to drop. Let's apply to the Dice Tower. Tom was like, yeah, come back when you've got 10. How about that? Okay, Tom, yes. So, yeah, that first one. I remember you getting on Twitter, Ronan, and absolutely spending hours and hours following people, tweeting, and I think it actually bore fruit.
I don't know why that made me laugh, but bearing fruit. It was one of those where gaming podcasting, I know it's only a few years ago, but was a lot smaller back then. I mean, there was maybe 10% of the number of gaming podcasts there are now. I mean, the hobby's exploded, so obviously the media coverage exploded. I mean, YouTube coverage was very much nascent, and it was a different landscape out there, and there was, in my view anyway, less of a sort of media community which you could hook up with and make friends with. And especially in the UK, you know, we're in that funny position of being just outside Europe, very soon really outside Europe, but anyway, and not in America. And it's hard to kind of link in everything all together. So we were just looking at how do we build an audience, as much an audience as we can. And definitely sort of the social media was part of it. I took on Twitter. You took on Facebook. That's the third bus I throw you under.
Do you mean that I linked your Twitter to Facebook?
And then washed your hands of it.
And then walked away.
You're the worst.
So everything you were putting out on Twitter was just popping up on Facebook. So, well, job done.
Thanks for being Facebook champion. I hope everyone can hear the air quotes around that one. But getting on the Dice Tower network was a huge thing from as soon as we got on there back in September of 2013. Up to the present day, and it does carry that cachet that people look at it, and obviously we've got our email signature. Why wouldn't you have it there? And people are, oh, your podcasts are great, and then they will actually listen to you, and people will go through the site. And I don't know how much of an impact it has on our audience, but I think it's pretty huge. And even people that don't listen to Dice Tower anymore, I mean, we know them, and maybe because they know us and they feel obliged to listen sometimes, will say to us that they still listen, and that's kind of nice that it generates people through the podcast for us. And not every podcast is for everyone, and we're definitely not the best podcast out there, but we're good enough to have kept a few of you listening. And I think it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is it was a great opportunity for us. Thanks to Tom, thanks to everyone there, and it opens up all sort of different things for us to do as well, like meeting people, being part of the network, being on the booth at Essen or UK Games Expo and saying hello to lots of people. And it was a very positive thing, Sean, so thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking there about it's kind of opening doors for listeners to join, which it does, and it is brilliant. But I felt like the publisher side, it was the real noticeable factor of being part of the Dice Tower. We went from kind of, okay, so I need to listen to your podcast a few times, I need to see your download figures, I need to see this, I need to see that before we'll even do interviews or send you games for review, etc. But you add that Dice Tower bit in, and all of a sudden people are like, okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Have a game to review.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if they think we are the Dice Tower when we're saying it. Is the American accent's going too far?
I've got a big red trilby hat that I wear around.
What do I wear? Put on fake massive hands. Okay, so It's all been audio for many years, and last autumn we jumped on an idea, and I get your idea again, Sean. Fourth bus of the day, just going through of creating video content.
Oh, but my one was a very vague idea right when we started. He was just like, oh, maybe eventually we'll move into the video world.
You pushed it more than that. You bought a few bits of equipment, and
that wasn't what I had envisioned. I just thought it'd be like us with that generic wall of games behind us doing the reviews, very similar to how Tom does his reviews, that kind of thing. That's what I envisaged. And then I thought nobody really wants to look at our faces. And then you popped up with the pit stops, Ronan. So where was your inspiration for the pit stops?
It was much as the inspiration actually for doing the podcast itself. Actually, sort of going back to that for 1 second, is that a lot of the board game podcasts back then were US based. There was only a couple that were actually based in the UK, which meant that sometimes they talked about games we couldn't get or we'd had for a long time. It was hard to know what was on the UK market, and also to try different formats. And really what I wanted to do was be in a podcast that I would want to listen to. And that very much went through to the idea for pit stops. Part of it was us getting a bit choked with our own success and getting the very, very fortunate opportunity to get given or discounted a lot of review copies, especially around Essen, because that's just a big thing that people know our podcast for the Essen coverage. So I was thinking, well, we cannot possibly do a full review on all of these. As we talk about, we try and do lots of plays to review, and we'll get onto that later, how we go about reviewing. What can we do to cover these games that people are being so kind to offer to us? And also, if we're doing it in video format, what niche in the market did I think wasn't being covered for what I want? And that was really what it was to it. And I find myself, unless it's a Kickstarter game, and even then sometimes not, just an overview of how the game plays. I don't necessarily want to spend half an hour reading a rule book. I don't want someone telling me all the lore behind it. I don't necessarily need a talking head of the designer being charming. They're all great, but sometimes I just want to crack on. Maybe I'm a bit impatient at work and in life. I just want to show me in a few minutes what I do in this game and then what happens in the game, so I can then decide whether I want to look into it or not and dig further. That was the inspiration for Pit Stops, the sort of video that I felt was missing for me when I want to look at games.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes into its own, hopefully, around those Essen times and the UK Games Expo, Gen Con, when you are trying to sniff out what games you want to be interested in and what games you just want to push to the side as something that you're not really going to head darts towards. And so many times, as Rona said, you've got people doing run-throughs, which are fantastic. I love to watch a run-through, but once I'm interested in the game, once I know something about the game, I want to see reviews on that game. But I want something just to pique that interest, and I think that's where the pit stops fall in. There are other videos that do a similar job, but we've targeted that market, and hopefully people have seen the worth of them. And just before we get on to our questions, Ronan, we talked about getting into the games, but what's your inspiration to actually not just do the podcast, but just getting into gaming reviewing in any way, shape or form?
I just like to talk a lot.
Fair enough. This is true. This is true.
I'm not sure I put too much weight in my own opinions, to be honest with you. It was more, I think, for me, less that I felt like my voice needs to be heard, but more that it was something different to do and a challenge, and to learn new skills and to do something I haven't done before, right? And I think we both said it made us so much better at speaking in general, presenting. In this new role I'm doing, I have to hold conference calls and what have you, and I don't stutter when I'm doing them. And people say, you do that, you talk and it just flows. And I think that comes from 5 years of podcasting, to be able to just sit down, here's my notes, right, I can just talk about it. That's not to say that, I'm any sort of a standard of a broadcaster or anything like that, but a bit better than I was before. And I just like to do different things. And it's more the process, Sean. And the fact that that's then got us in touch with other people, gives us a reason to play games, and just gives me something to do to focus my mind away from work. Is more about it, rather than the fact that I felt desperate that I wanted to start reviewing games.
I think for me, it was that first year going to Essen. I talk about it all the time. I bring it up all the time. But it was that first year going to Essen and seeing the amount of people that were interested in gaming. And I kind of had in the back of my mind, I'd like to be a reviewer of something and something that I'm passionate about. And I've tried in the past. When I was a kid, I used to write into the computer game magazines with reviews and always got mocked and told to go away. And Yeah, just walking into Essen and seeing all these people interested in that one hobby are just overwhelmed me. And then I started watching reviews and I started looking at YouTube videos and stuff. And then obviously Tom, being probably the biggest personality in this sort of wave of YouTube reviewers for gaming, he kind of inspired me to a degree. I watched him, I watched how natural he was on the camera, I watched how he dived into the games, his style, and I just thought, you know what, I'd like to do something like that. I don't think I'll ever be as good, but I'd like to contribute in some way to this hobby that I'm so passionate about. So that's why I kind of thought, yeah, let's do this, Ronan. So
two different approaches. It wouldn't be like us to agree on anything ever in terms of motivations and approach to anything. So I'm glad we've kept that consistent anyway. Right. Shall we crack on to our first set of questions, Sean?
Yes, Roland. So we've got some questions from Max Vigna, and Max has gone to great lengths to send us a few questions, and they're all very deep and thinky, but I'm going to really summarise here. So what Max would like to know is, do internet reviewers play games enough to give a genuine recommendation? Now, he goes on to explain where he's coming from on this, but Ronan, what's your take on that? Because it is the kind of question of the moment. There's a lot of people being called on whether they play things enough at the moment.
So I will say, in my opinion, in terms of an actual genuine recommendation and a review, in terms of if you buy this game, is it going to be worth your money? You're going to get lots of plays out of it? Not usually. And that's just my experience, that I think that there's a big rush to get out coverage of the latest game. But it shows in the audience that that's what the audience wants. So to me, when I get a lot of reviews in, I treat them as first impressions. I'll mention a couple of podcasts that I do like that tend to do more than just first impression. For example, Heavy Cardboard. They'll tell you exactly how many times they've played the game and with what player counts, and give you some thoughts. And what I like about some of their reviews is that they will say, I really like this in the first 3 games. However, after that, I started to get a couple of problems with it here and there. And that's how it worked for me. And that's what 2 of them say. Dukes of Dice, I know that, especially on the recent episodes, there's been maybe slightly fewer plays of games, but their general approach when they had more time and I hope things will settle down, when they've played a game a lot, I like their depth of coverage because they will talk through and explain, in 3 players it was this, in 5 players it was that. And I like to hear that, and then I can form my own opinions. A lot of stuff, like I say, I just treat as first impressions. Tom will tell you again and again that on the Dice Tower videos, they go for breadth and not depth. And they'll play a game a couple of times, maybe once. So at least that's quite open. And that if you're careful, or you have to be careful with how much money you spend on games or what have you, then go for a breadth of reviews. And that's why I think having so many podcasters, so many video makers can only be a good thing. There are so many games coming out that one review can't cover it all. And that if something is interesting you, like maybe from a pit stop, hopefully then there's a few different opinions around for you to be able to jump on them. And it's an inspiration for some of our formats in that we do our end of year. We talked about we're doing 2017 soon, or talking about games that are going to go into the vault that people have nominated, or our top 50, or we might refer back to during reviews. That we try and give a bit of depth to the coverage. So we're not always reviewing the newest games. Sometimes they're really old games, but at least we're trying to get an angle on it. And that has always been our angle. And I think it means that, it's not the only reason, but it probably does affect our listenership and viewership to some degree, because we're not always the newest and the hottest. And the game comes out on a Thursday. Our review does not get posted on the Monday. Our review will get posted 2 months after that, when we've had a good chance to dig into it. But I'm quite happy with where we sit and in our area. And as long as you know where a review is coming from and what their background is, and they're honest about how often they've played the game, then I think that you will develop your own ability to make your own decisions on that.
I hate you. You've said everything. Nothing I can add to that. Like I was just going to say.
It's been 5 years though. It's been 5 years. You've just been going, I agree with it.
Not always. I think just games in themselves are like, a lot of them are getting more and more complex, and a lot of games nowadays they're just not apparent. Like the depth of them is not apparent after 1 or 2 or 3 plays. You've really got to dig into them. I think that the reviewers, like the Secret Cabal, will say, listen, I've played this once, I've played this twice. Even when they go back a year later to look at games that they reviewed, they'll be honest about it. They'll say, you know what, I haven't touched that game since that day.
They will say, for 90% of them, the game's amazing, though.
True. You know what you're getting. Like, that's the thing. They're open. They wear their heart on their sleeve, and you know exactly what you're getting. As Ryan said, you know exactly what you're going to get with the heavy cardboard. You know they're going to delve into it. The long view. You know he's going to have played that game about 8,000 times, so he knows it inside out. And for us, I don't think we're good enough to pick apart a game after one or two plays. I'm certainly not good enough. So one of us has to have played a game, I would say, at least 4 or 5 times before we even step into that review. The other one might not have played it at all, which is fine. Then we just try and get some questions together, just things that we want to know about that game before we do play it. But in general, we do try to play everything at least 4 or 5 times. Sometimes that doesn't materialise just because we just don't have the time to play it, but we've committed to doing that review. But we'll state that. So it's knowing the show that you're going to and making sure that they're honest and open about what they do.
One of the things, though, that's interesting is that although we've always pushed to be in that niche, one of the much more popular episodes we've done is myself and Ellie covering those 14 games or whatever it was, doing very quick and saying, we've only played these games once, here's our quick thoughts. And lots of people going, oh, I love that. Can you do more of that? Do more of the thing that is not what we've set ourselves up to do.
But you've been honest about it. It's exactly the same as when I did my Essen coverage. Literally played Lorenzo Magnifico once, and a couple of the other games I covered just once in the hotel room. Quickly did a 30-minute, not even 30, 15-minute podcast, quickly running over what I said, and people came back with comments, and we don't often get comments. It's one of the things about internet reviewing. You don't get a lot of comments. You get a lot of views, and you know the viewers are there. But for that one particular, people will say, yeah, really great show, really liked it, really liked the format. But yeah, so you're right. So people do want something a little bit different sometimes. So maybe we should mix it up a bit.
No, we're just not going to give it to them. No, I don't want to.
No.
No.
What do you mean you enjoy that? No, you don't.
You can't have that. No, I'm not giving what you want. How dare you?
How very dare you.
Podcasting as our parent. Okay. The next question from Max is, what are our feelings about the number of games we get every year? He can remember when there's only half a dozen that came out a year, but these days there are scores of high-quality, well-produced, great games. How can this be a bad thing? However, is oversaturation going to lead problems in the longer term? How are we going to go if we miss out on great games or they're not making it to market? This huge competition, is it affecting things? And are we going to see the bubble burst, or is gaming going to continue to grow? Sean, what do you think?
So in general, the collector and the manic game player and buyer in me, it's like more games. Yeah, it's a great thing. Keep them coming. I think one of the reasons I'm happy and comfortable with that is that games don't come in exactly the same format. So you know what kind of game you like. So then you can reduce the search parameters. So if you know you like a thematic dungeon crawler, then there's your search parameters. You know what you're looking for. If you fancy a deep Euro game, there you know what you're looking for. So you're condensing your searching. I think one thing it does hamper is the Kickstarter market, Ronan. I think it's really hard for a simple good idea in Kickstarter now to surface without a gimmick, without plastic behind it, and without looking absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure there's loads of great games that just go straight under the radar because they just don't have the money or the resources to push loads of miniatures into that. So that's the one area where loads of games and the gimmicks in games is not great. But I think limiting game production would actually be wrong because people's opinions vary.
Yeah, the effect of Kickstarter is interesting. I don't know if you listened to the interview on the Dice Tower a week or two ago with the guy from Colossal Games, and he was saying basically that games are splitting down the middle, and the most successful games either cost $30 and less, or they cost $90 and above. And that's where we're going to, where it's actually going to be hard to get middle of the road games. Now, for us, being next to Europe, it's a bit easier. That's where a lot of Euros come from. They sit between those price brackets, and that's where it's generated. And they slowly drip out after Essen over into the US. But in the US, it's tended to be much cheaper games or much more expensive games. in terms of how many games there are, I just thought that was an interesting point, by the way. I'm not sure it really links back to that question, but as you were talking, I was reminded of it. In terms of going back to whether there are too many games or not, you can't read every book that comes out, you can't watch every film that comes out, and you can't listen to every album that comes out. This is what a mature medium looks like, in that you must pick and choose what you can enjoy, that you're going to have to rely more on reviews of games, and reviewing games consumes more time than being able to review a film or an album or even a book, because once you've gone through it once, the second time you go through, it is much less likely to be a different experience than it is with a game with different people with a different player count. That's not to say that every time you read a book you have the same experience, but the amount of change is going to be different to it is in playing a game. And generally in playing a game, you need more than one person. If I'm a film reviewer, I can go watch a film in the cinema, I'll come out, write my review, I'm done. It's taken a few hours. Gaming tends to take longer. So we're going to need to develop a media alongside this amount of games in order to support the audience, I think. And even when you do that, you're going to get the different sorts of fits. You're going to get the AAA titles who have been reviewed by everyone and generate lots of hype. And the smart publishers are going to go down there, and the ones that are big enough to do it. And they're going to get their rulebooks out early, and they're going to engage with media. And you're going to get indie hits and stuff like that, which come out and get buzz and word of mouth. The thing that we find in our industry more than other industries is that rather than that small company having that game, because it costs so much money in initial investment, big publishers tend to pick up their small games and then publish them, and then they look like big hits. But in reality, they're indie hits. Terraforming Mars really is an indie hit. It's from a tiny, tiny Swedish publisher. It happens to have been picked up by Stronghold Games and become massive, but I'm still going to stick to its indie roots. So it's just a maturation of our hobby, and I think that the strong will survive and the weak will fall away, and we'll see publishers come in and going. And as we see at the moment, you'll see publishers starting up their second companies, third companies, fourth companies as they've bought up, because you can't control creativity, and the good designers and the good publishers are always going to come back again. They might sell on the name of a company and go and start another one, and we're going to see constant innovation, and I can see it still growing for a while. And I think not so much that the growth is going to continue at this rate, but then once we get to a certain size, everything will start to settle down, and we'll get into a format where the good games will come your way. We're still affected by the fact that we're still relatively close to that time when there were only 30 games coming out a year. That's gone. It's never going to happen again, well, not for a long time. You still buy the same amount of games. It's how you do that buying and how you get the news of what you want to buy that's going to change. And that's why I see it really developing.
Very good, very good. Very insightful, Mr. Rice.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so last question for this section. Max asks, are plastic miniatures a good thing in board gaming today? He goes on to say that he actually plays lots of mini games. He's got the 40k, Ninth Age Infinity, and he really enjoys the painting aspect of it, but he's saying that that's enough for him, and in actual board gaming he'd actually much rather see a colourful standee or decent product. So minis, Roland, it's another hot topic that kind of divides the gaming world. Where do you stand on it?
Firmly not fussed either way, to be honest with you. I'm much more interested in the mechanisms, and definitely now I feel like my back end, we tend to see more mini-based games, right, coming from Kickstarter. We'll refer back to that again, or via some crowdfunding. I am much slowing down here on backing mini games on Kickstarter because I'm looking at mechanisms. I've got lots of toys. I like them. Of course, they're fun. I love it when you get out massive, mythic battles. Of course I love playing with those cool minis. However, it's the game system that I really love about that game. So that's where I'm coming from with it, really, that I'm not that fast. Standees work really well in Legends of Andor, which I really like. They work very well in Gloomhaven. I would never paint that number of monsters as you get in Gloomhaven. We'd never have got that massive a game with minis in, or it certainly would have cost 3 times the amount. So I'm perfectly happy for it to be standees. Sometimes minis are great. I backed Batman because it was Batman and I wanted all those toys as well. So I'm kind of in the middle, but a clever system way above whether it's minis or standees.
So I was always the bling champion for this podcast, and there was a time, I think very recently probably, where minis were almost a must for me. I was at the forefront of the clamour for minis and everything. Minis are better, but they're actually on the decline for me now. I think a good meeple or a standees in City of Kings, which I've recently been playing, Gloomhaven, I think they look just as good, if not better, because, as Ronnie said, you can't paint them all. And my standard of painting just looks like someone's vomited some paint on them anyway. So they're obviously going to look better than I can produce. So yeah, I'm starting to come across to the side of the good standee. Obviously, there are going to be the exceptions. Ronan mentioned Mythic Battles, and I would throw Lords of Hellas into that mix. It just looks amazing, but the minis are actually functional in that you can build up the statues. So I'm not sure how that would work with cardboard or standees. So I think there are always going to be exceptions. I'm always going to have my eye turned towards the prettier or the more extravagant miniatures. But yeah, I'm starting to go your way, Max. I'm starting to think in those circles that standees are the better option.
Okay, Sean, cool. So we are going to hear from another guest, and then we're going to be back to take a look back at our very first episode.
Hi guys, Chris Marling here, writer of the Go Play Listen blog, co-designer of Armageddon, Empire Engine and now Pioneer Days, and occasional pit dweller. I've managed to get myself on 2 different board gaming podcasts over recent years, and the Game Pit is comfortably my second favourite of the 2. That said, the other one, Board Games to Go, is actually my favourite podcast about anything, including board gaming. And I think yours now is my second favourite board game podcast. Nothing to do with me contributing to it, I just thoroughly enjoy it. Essentially, I think of you guys as my number 2s. I'm one of the, I'm sure, millions of people that have listened to all of your episodes. I think I probably started around episode 20 and have even worked my way back through the older ones. I like doing that with a new podcast because it's always nice to hear how amateur podcasters start out rough, ready, unprofessional and sort of slowly become this sort of well-oiled machine. But I'm a patient man, so I'm sure that if you guys stick with it, that's what you'll become too. But no, what I most like about the podcast is your contrasting opinions, the unforced banter, and you know, that's something that quite a few other board gaming podcasts that I've listened to have lost over the years for various reasons. You know, they've drawn together more, or they've kind of changed who's on them, and that has ruined it. But I can't see that happening with you guys, because I'm totally convinced that if either of you disappeared to become, I don't know, an underwear model or something, one of your better halves would just drop straight into the second seat and make whoever was left look like a total fool. It's been great to hear the show become more of a group effort as well, and, you know, bringing your family and your friends and stuff in, and despite all of that, it's never lost its niggly playfulness. So congratulations on 100 episodes, and long may they continue. And also, good job on getting this podcast totally out of sequence in terms of numbering. A fitting homage to the Escher-esque podcast numbering system from your early days. Bravo.
Okay, so that was our good friend Mr. Chris Marling, and I think he just likened us to poo-poo, Ronan.
I'm not going to repeat that industrial language. Shocking. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. I knew the better halves were going to get a mention there, as they tend to do. Natalie and Eleanor coming in and just showing us up.
Can we just clarify that Eleanor's my daughter, not my other half?
True, this is true.
That was the sound of the police there for a minute. Rachel's been on in the Virgin Queen episode. And
she has, yes.
She is due to be on soon, if ever we get to play games again, because she's doing a 2-player special with me while you have baby things.
Awesome. And I think we've got to hold our hand up. The numbering system was ridiculous. So
I still like that numbering system.
Do you still like it?
The public clamoured for it to go, but I still think it made a lot of sense.
It was your idea, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm bowing to the public pressure here. Anyway, I'll tell you an episode that was no problem to number, Sean.
What one was it, Ronan? Go on, tell us.
It was 1. You kind of gave that away in the question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Anyway, episode 1. If ever I was to sum it up in one word, I think I'd go with over-edited.
Laborious.
Oh, nice. I won't listen to it. Did you?
I did go back and listen to it, Ronan. And I know you hate it when I say it, it's better than number 2.
There we go. That's the second mention of episode 2. I'm keeping count.
Honestly, if you want to laugh, go listen to episode 2. See a bump in the fingers.
It's not available. You know it's not available for very good reasons. Now, episode 1, we started as we were meant to go on, and our sound still isn't perfect, but it's a bit better than it was then.
Yes. Yes.
I experimented with the you left ear, me right ear system for a while there.
Yes. And it wasn't this one, Ronan, but you know when you were talking about the editing reminds me of, do you remember when we did Belfort's?
Belfort's, yes.
Belfort's. Do you remember the trouble you went to editing that 10-second intro music for it?
That's not my favourite one. My favourite one was Carson City. But yeah, I did about 2 episodes of putting together all sound clips into some sort of funny intro for each game. Like Carson City is supposed to be the start of a bar fight, and there's a dolphin at the end of it, because clearly that's funny.
And this one was like dwarves whistling, I remember wood being cut.
Yeah.
And chains being rattled.
That might be the best 10 seconds that we've ever had on the podcast. And it only took me 3.5 hours to put together.
Literally what I was about to say. It only took you 3 hours to put together.
Totally worth it.
Well done, you.
That habit soon went. Sound issues, Sean. I know we always get told off for not having perfect sound. It's one of those things where we record as and when we can, sometimes on the fly. Quite often I literally have got my headphones plugged into an iPad in a room I can find to record, just because of the nature of our work and kids and all the rest of it. So no, we're not a professional. Sometimes, especially back earlier, we didn't sound that professional. We didn't have the best equipment. We still don't have the best equipment. But you know, we do our best. Our sound's got a bit better.
Speak for yourself, buddy. I've just upgraded to a Blue Yeti.
And what about your microphone?
Hey! Yeah, I don't know how to use it. This is true. So my sound probably is still rubbish, but I've got a good piece of equipment finally.
Oh, that's good for this episode. Yeah. I've got some sort of nascent plan to turn half the bedroom into a recording studio. It hasn't fully been approved, I'd have to say, by the planning commission. But I think our sound will slowly improve as we slowly get better.
I think it has. I think people that would have no qualms with telling us we're idiots have come up to us and actually said, you know what, it's 100 times better and it's better than some other podcasts that are out there now. So I think we did spend a few quid eventually on some pretty decent headsets, and now obviously I've got the Yeti, and I think we're getting there, Ronan.
We're getting there. And so I tell you what drives me crazy. I will throw another podcast under the bus, but it's not a gaming one. There's an NFL podcast done by Sky Sports and NFL, 2 massive companies, and they do it at the end of a phone, and it sounds like it's recorded on a mobile phone half the time, and they don't even balance the sound levels. It drives me crazy. You've got to turn it right up for one of them to talk. Then the next guy comes in and your eardrums get blown out. So we're better than some professional podcasts, but worse than most podcasts, we'd have to say. Anyway, the content itself of episode 1, Sean, we were going to look back at the 6 games we reviewed and say how they've stood up to the test of time.
We were, Ronan. So the first of the 6, Ronan, was Stone Age. How is Stone Age holding up for you now? Because I think even back then it was kind of on the wane for you.
It was because I'd played it a lot. And it sticks that way. Good medium weight Euro. I've played it probably 3 times in the last 5 years, and I'm perfectly happy with that player count. I can't remember if it was prior to that review or since it that I played it in a sort of Euro competition. And it was a great game of Stone Age because all of us knew it very, very well. And it was very high scoring and we're all very close. And I came 3rd out of 4, but never mind. That's better than 4th. And so really good, solid game. If you've never played it, if you missed it, you came to the hobby later than that, really well worth a go. It's slightly different. There's a bit of luck in there. You're assigning workers to areas and you have to roll dice to see how well you do. But it's certainly mitigated luck. And there's different paths to victory. And a good starting out Euro game, Sean, which is still very solid, but slightly played out for me.
Yeah, it was certainly one of my starting out Euro games, which is probably why it remains in my collection. I think it's probably a 1 a year, maybe even once every 18-month game for me, but I don't play a lot of games on apps, but it's actually one of the ones I do play and enjoy on the app, and I play the app quite a few times. So I suppose I play Stone Age a few times a year, but the board game itself, not so much. But it's one of the games that got me back involved in board gaming, and certainly one of the first worker placements I played. So yeah, Stone Age, always a place in my heart.
So the second game, Sean, another sort of dice assignment game to do actions, is Alien Frontiers, one of the very first Kickstarter games that was a success. I remember chasing it down. It was initially on Kickstarter. Any thoughts?
I'm still very much a fan of Alien Frontiers. I do play it quite often. I quite like the expansions. I thought some of the aspects of the expansions brought some nice things to it and added to it. Some of it's a bit tedious, but yeah, Alien Frontier is still very much at the forefront of my gaming collection, Ronan.
Another one that's a good game that slightly faded over time with 20 plus plays. Certainly the expansion brought more players than 4, which is an absolute crippling amount of downtime. Never played more than 4 players. And actually, I think the expansions are absolute rubbish. So I would just go for the base game every time. Even though it's faded a bit, what the expansions added for me was not better play, it was just more boring play. So Alien Frontiers, good game. If you ever were to play it 20 plus times, it might start fading. It did for me.
Okay, so I think we're on fairly solid ground with D-Day Dice, Ronan. The second edition has just come out. You've done a pit stop for that, so it's fresh in the memory, and it's certainly a game that I still really enjoy. It's one of my favourite cooperative games out there, and remains so. So that, yeah, definitely a fan of D-Day Dice still.
Yeah, one of our first decent looking pit stops when I got the lighting sorted out. It's got over 4,000 views because it was on the Kickstarter page. Still a very good game itself, and I'm very much looking forward to the second edition. Looks like they tidied up a few bits and bobs, some extra content. So yeah, very good game, D-Day Dice. Very happy with it.
Okay, so Milestones, Ronan, is the next one on the list. And yeah, I've forgotten it. How about you?
Oh, well, I wrote Forgettable. It was Stronghold when they first trying to get into a bit of Euro area, and there was a rondel thingy going on where you moved around and you collected resources, and there was a map where you built routes and it gave you access to different things. It was perfectly okay, but as you've alluded to, forgettable.
Yeah, I've played it a couple of times with you around that time to do the review. Never played it again and completely had forgotten about it until it came up in this episode. So yeah, it really didn't stay in the mind.
Yeah, I put it up for a review because I played it and I went, oh, I feel like there's something to this. I'm going to play it a few more times and it will develop. And it completely plateaued from, oh, I think there's something. Oh, there is nothing. No, it's just okay, fine. And it is just okay. From the okay to the sublime. Sean, Yedo.
Right, I'm going to upset you now.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
I don't think... Because when we first did this review, I hadn't played it at this stage. I'd seen it being played. I hadn't actually played a full game through myself. And you were so excited about it. And even to this day, you love this game. I know you do. I'm not spoiling it for anyone. And I expected fireworks, and they didn't quite happen. It didn't have the promised magic for me. I found it a little bit frustrating. I owned it on the back of your wonder for it. And I've just literally this week sold it. I've packaged it off and sold it, and hopefully to a home that will enjoy it, because it is a good game. There's a good game there, just not for me.
This is one of the barriers we have between us. We do agree on some aspects in games and we very much disagree on other aspects of games. And it's not just specifically on Yedo. It's a lot of things to do with tightness and frustration and obstacles getting put in your path and having to think your way around them. And sometimes them coming out of nowhere and you having to react what's done. You much more would prefer to have a plan and have an engine and run it and know exactly what direction you're going in. And it's just, we've got two different tastes on games.
Absolutely, yeah. You love the take that aspect, don't you? You love that, right? Have some of that.
It's not even take that. It's not really in Yedo. There is a little bit.
There is. People can just slap things down and go, ha ha.
There is a bit. There's a few action cards. But a lot more of the obstacle comes from people just vying for spaces. True. Yeah. And you sort of weighing up the risk. If I don't take it now, will it still be available next time it comes around to me? And that, I think, is just a part of tight gameplay. So you're right, take that's there, but also the tight gameplay's there. I enjoy, in general, tight gameplay more than you do. Yeah, I'd be more Agricola. I think you'd be more Caverna. I'd be more Tigers and Euphrates. You might enjoy Yen and Yangtze more. I don't know, maybe. Along those sort of lines. So Yedo, I really like the tightness and the meanness and the fact that it keeps punching you in your groin.
You're not wrong. You are wrong about Tigers and Euphrates. I love Tigers and Euphrates. But the last game is one for Ronan to tee off. It's League of Six. Ronan, off you go.
it's still rubbish. utter rubbish. The designer hates it so much he didn't give the goods names. The name of the goods are literally red, green, blue and yellow. That's how much he doesn't like his own game. It's rubbish.
It's not rubbish.
It is.
Admittedly, it's not as good as I remembered it. When I played it recently, it's not as good as I remember it at all. I think it opened my eyes to certain aspects of gaming, and it's another one that stays in the collection just because it was one of the first games I played when I was getting back in the hobby. So yeah, I appreciate it's not the best game, but still holds a place in my heart.
Just recycle it. I'd feel happier thinking those bits got made it into something else useful. Okay. Those were the 6 games we covered in episode 1, Sean, and we're going to go on to a few more questions sent in, this time from the mercurial, mysterious gaming meister that is Paul A.
Whoa. And Paul A's first question is, what's the worst, most embarrassing mistake you've made when reviewing a game?
So I did think through this, and the worst mistake I made over the course of the podcast, I think, wasn't actually in a review. It was when we're doing our end of game roundup and we look forward to games coming out in the next 12 months and what was I most excited about. And the game I was really revving up towards, it was the next game out from the people who made Sentinels of the Multiverse, Greater Than Games. It was a sci-fi co-op in which you were supposed to be a band of sort of space pirates fighting together, having to band together against a big, huge threat, and it was threatening the galaxy, and it was Galactic Strike Force. And I said, this is a cast iron, guaranteed, great company who have already made a complex co-op that works incredibly well with a fantastic theme.
It's
this
horrific.
Game got no wrong.
It's the worst.
Oh man. Oh, do you know what? I'm so sorry I ever made you play that game.
Oh my God, it's bad. I bought it before we played it because I was so sure you were right.
Just terrible. You could very easily get in an endless loop. The base up was unlosable, but to win it took 4 or 5 hours while you slowly ground through the things in front of you. It wasn't play tested. The combinations didn't work. It wasn't fun. It was one of the worst games that's ever gone to production that I have ever had the misfortune to play. Galactic Strike Force, that is my worst, most embarrassing mistake all rolled into one. Sean, you?
I'm going to be quite boring, Ronan, because most of mine are things that you save me from doing. Because Ronan, unlike me, the opposite way, Ronan actually listens to what I say when I'm saying it and actually comes in and says, like, you've really messed that one up. And just silly little things like calling plaid hat and stuff like that, and he'd be like, no, it's plaid hat, you clown. And stuff like that, and I'd be, oh, okay, yeah, I'll start that again. And it's just, I've got so many mistakes every episode. And editing is the friend of a good podcaster as well.
It's all
the rubbish that gets spoken and the mistakes that are made that are edited out. Oh.
It really needs editing, because when I listen back to myself, the number of times I tell Sean off, and about 50% of them he's made a mistake, and about 50% of the time I've just clearly been listening to the voices in my head. And he hasn't said what I think he said at all.
It's very, very annoying. When I'm doing a bit of editing, I'm sitting probably at work, wasting my time at work, and I'm there, and all of a sudden they'd be like, no, you idiot, what have you said that for? And then I'll be going, oh, but I didn't do it, I swear, I could swear I didn't do it, and I'll listen back, and I didn't do it. And he made me start again.
Sometimes I throw them in just because it makes me laugh. Did I say that? Yeah, you definitely said that.
You're a hateful person.
It's not making me laugh. I've got a cough. You're right. What's the next question, Sean? I'm going to think up something to annoy you with now.
So if I come back and I sound slightly irate, it's because he's done it again. Okay, so games you wish you could review, but can't.
So for this one, it's nothing new. It's the number one game, Board Game Geek, Gloomhaven. In order to give Gloomhaven a proper review, I mean, I feel like I'd have to be discussing the tactics of each of the different characters, all of them in combo, in the different scenarios, review the options you've got for how you build each deck as you go through the levels. I mean, there is not a podcast episode, there is an entire podcast in itself in Gloomhaven. When we've got the community-driven campaign getting created now, it's onto its 9th scenario, with just an incredible amount of content coming out constantly for it. And the best description I've had of Gloomhaven if you've never played it, if you have not, is Sam Hoffman said it's like the X-Men playing together. That I might be playing as Wolverine and Sean might be playing as Colossus, and you can play that I'm Wolverine doing my things with the claws and he's Colossus doing his thing with his metal body. But once Colossus and Wolverine work out that if Colossus picks out Wolverine and throws him and then he does this and Wolverine bounces off and comes back, we are better together. It's those combos between the characters that is the real genius in how to play Gloomhaven. And to be able to do all that and get all the depth and review it all fully, I just don't feel like I could do it justice and call it a full, proper review. So I'm not ever going to bother attempting to. But as you can tell by what I'm saying, it's going to get a mention in the review of 2017 for sure.
Yeah, we did do a very brief overview, like just after the first 3 or 4 plays that myself and Natalie had done. Again, talking about bad sound quality, that was another one of our poor
that was a table
efforts.
mic.
That was the table mic effort.
Wow,
Didn't
wow,
quite
wow,
work
wow,
out.
wow. Hello, wow, wow, wow.
But yeah, there is an overview of it out there. For me, so I went at this from 2 angles. So the game that's around that I really want to play and review is Food Chain Magnate. Now, that's just because it just sounds so cool. It sounds like so in-depth, sounds like an experience. So many people think it's just the ultimate board game. I want me some of that.
You know that we've talked Steve Paget into buying that, don't you?
Yeah, I know. He's played it once, and yeah, he said he just couldn't get his head around it at all. But as I said to him at the time, you've got to play it about 10 times before you even start. So he's gonna persevere. I think he liked the tickle that he had first. So that's Food Chain Magnate. And
I agree, I really want to play that, by the way. I haven't played
Cool.
it either. Second one?
The other one is a game that doesn't exist. I'm a big Green Lantern fan. I've always thought that a game about the Green Lantern Corps would be really interesting. It would be kind of like a space police game where you go in to solve various crimes around different quadrants and different characters have different powers. Not quite a dungeon crawl, more like, I don't know, police precinct style type of game where you
why would you
solving
curse
crimes.
any game by referring to that?
I wasn't that bad.
Rubbish.
It could have been better.
Have you looked at the police game that's on Kickstarter right now? Based on Street Masters, Brook City or something, is it?
Brook City, that's right, yeah.
Something like that.
Of course I've looked at it.
And you're sniffing.
I'm sniffing.
Well, let me know and I'll cancel my pledge. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, yeah, so something along those lines, like a police game, but set in space with the Green Lantern theme attached onto it. That's my second answer.
Yeah, I'm not that fussed by that theme. You'd have to sell that game to me, I'd have to say.
I don't care about you. It's for me.
You don't care about me at all?
No.
Or just in this?
At all, obviously.
You lied many times to me at certain moments in time. Most baffling or selfish decisions, Sean, you have seen in co-ops?
So this is only a problem if the group allows it, so you have to get into the right group, but it's people wanting to get all the glory in games and do all the tasks. Like the alpha, not even an alpha player, just someone saying, right, my character can do this, so I'm going to go and do bosh, 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 and then leave everyone else thinking, well, there's not really a lot for me to do. And it's the person who wanders off in a dungeon crawler. Well, I'm going to go and fight over here, and I'm going to do it all on my own because I'm super strong and I've collected all these weapons. That irritates me, and I think it's a very selfish thing to do.
Okay, people who don't communicate during co-ops, who play solo, and then complain about the system and say, oh, that system's rubbish. Well, you haven't played it, so how can you possibly say? You've played a solo game amongst other people. I have to play as a team. You need to talk and bounce off each other. You need to not be too serious and support funny or character-driven decisions, whereby you go, oh, I'm going to do this because, that might be funny. I think in terms of a specific, and I'm sorry to refer to it twice and two, but we played Gloomhaven the other day. We played one of the side quests that you can discover where we had to go and do something with a well, which is about the 4th room along, I think, and it looked pretty dire for us about 2/3 of the way through, and suddenly a plan, we didn't even discuss it, it kind of came out of what we were doing, and Rachel just ran off to uncover the rest of the map because we hadn't uncovered 2 of the rooms, and she was like, right, at least we'll see what's coming, because I'm very low on health, I'm going to die anyway, so let me go and uncover it, which she did, great. Then we worked out that because I'm playing a sort of healer tinkerer, that Jacob could get the thing we needed and make it all the way in his movements, I then had to sacrifice myself and throw all my heals towards Jacob to get him past the big monsters that were guarding it, so he could get in the final room and have a chance of killing the final guardians and get the thing in the well and us to win the scenario. Now, that is exactly what happened. And as it happened, he got past the guardian. One guardian came out because Rachel had uncovered it so early. He managed to get past the second guardian and do it, and we won the scenario. During this whole time that we played this scenario, probably 2 hours long, Puria never left the first half of the first room. For whatever we said as a team, he was like, oh, right, yeah, great, okay, we're going to do that, great. And then however he played his cards, he's like, oh, right, so are you moving? No, I'm just going to do here and shoot this. Okay, next turn. He never left the first half of the first room. And he wasn't being selfish, and he was kind of helping out a bit. But I was completely baffled at the end of it, how we won, carrying him. It's just, I don't know. But playing anything with Puria is quite baffling, as we're going to find out from the next question.
Yeah, well, not so much a question, just more of a memory that Paul had of an episode after, I think it was after Essen or end of year episode, when Puria was describing how many clothes and specifically how many pairs of pants he could get into the Nations box. Because, yeah, there wasn't a lot in that huge Nations box, and Puria went quite descriptive in explaining how much space.
At any time, you've only ever got a maximum of 30% of Puria's attention, no matter what you're doing. Life or death situation, he's still 30% in the room. So that was one of the more unique moments in the history of the Game Pit. Puria's description of pants in a Nations box. He's a worry, that boy.
Either way, but it was a good shout, because there was a lot of space in there, and he actually did put his clothes in there to traffic it home. So Traffic it home.
That's a trigger word. We're getting investigated. Okay. Shall we have a message from one of my true inspirations when we were first starting out in the Game Pit, Sean?
Yes, we shall.
Hello, Sean and Ronan, and congratulations on bringing the Game Pit to episode 100. That's fantastic. This is Mark Johnson from the Board Games to Go podcast, and now War Games to Go. I do both of those. And I want to offer my congratulations to you guys for your podcast, for chugging along as it's been doing. And I really have enjoyed listening to you from the beginning, I think. And what I like the most is the rapport between the two of you. I think that's just clearly the best part of the show. Not always your opinions, because sometimes your opinions are flat out wrong. I know when you guys had me on the show, I think I only got to speak with Ronan that time. And it's when I had moved abroad for a year. I was in France across the channel from you guys. I thought we were going to get a chance to meet in person at Essen or maybe UK Games Expo, but then you didn't go to Essen, I didn't go to UK Games Expo, and then, so we didn't get to meet in person, but I was able to be on your show, and I really enjoyed that. And what I like is that you guys have distinct opinions. Like I said, even when I think those opinions are wrong, you express those opinions, you argue with each other, you do so in a lighthearted way that shows that you're really friends, and it gives your podcast a special quality that I think is really endearing. So congrats again on reaching 100. Hope you make it another 100 more. Thanks.
Well, Sean, I mentioned it beforehand, but Mark Johnson was definitely one of those podcasters I listened to for years before we ever started podcasting. He's been around for a long time, and that episode I got to do with him on Shorter Games was one of the absolute highlights for me of doing the Game Pit, just to think that I was sharing airtime with someone who I've listened to for so long, and it's such a it's a stalwart, complimentary enough, a stalwart of board gaming podcasting. So thank you very much, Mark, for your kind words, and thank you for always being a supporter of the podcast, because he does chat to us a bit here and there, and he always supports us on Twitter, and I appreciate it a lot. It means a lot to me.
When are you proposing?
You ain't got to be like that. I would though, but he's married.
You're making me jealous now, aren't you? You're just doing it deliberately.
I'm jealous. He's married, so. I don't know why you had to bring that up on air in episode 1. It's supposed to be a celebration. You're upsetting me.
Okay, so moving swiftly on.
Well, maybe.
We have
maybe it's all over.
Some questions again from the wonderful Paul A. And he asks, how have your gaming tastes changed?
So, with covering games on the podcast, we're forced to try new games all the time. That was something that I really loved to do before I podcasted. I was always new games, try something new. I was new to the hobby, so you tend to do that anyway. And you're trying to discover what your tastes are and take them all in. I guess I refer back to reading when you're a teenager or a young adult. You tend to read loads of different stuff to kind of get a grounding in what you're doing. That means that in my own time, when I want a game now, I'll be much more likely to want to play old favourites and play the same games again and again and again. And my collection is centering itself around some of these games that I always like to play. And definitely how my tastes have changed. That I used to get excited to get a new game and get it out and get the bits out, and I'd always play a practice game, like four-handed, me against me against me against me, to learn the rules so that I knew how to teach it well and that I could present it properly, and I felt like I was giving everyone the best chance possible to enjoy their first game of a game. Having had to learn so many rules for doing the pit stops, now please you teach me games. Just I don't ever want to have to teach games, mostly because I keep forgetting the rules, because I learn them, I do the pit stops, and then I'm learning rules so quickly again that no game rules are sticking in my head. So that's definitely the biggest change now, is I don't ever want to be the person teaching games anymore.
For me, when I started it, I was very much all about the thematic games. Arkham Horror was one of the big games that got me back into gaming, and things like Castle Ravenloft and Descent and all things like that. And that was the things that I craved for. And I didn't really pay much attention to the Euro games. And then they slowly started creeping up onto me. Obviously, like Steve that we mentioned before, he is a big exponent of Euro games. We used to go around to his house and play these Euro games, and then he started just cranking the gears in my mind and thinking, wow, actually, that was difficult, but I really enjoyed it. So now I've learned that I really love economy in games, as Ronan loves to bring up. And I'll crowbar an economy strategy into pretty much anything, which is true. And yeah, Euro games are now right up there on a par, and some of them are my favourite games of all time. So yeah, that's the biggest change for me. I've swayed from pure thematic gaming to a mixture of the two.
And a second question kind of links into this, to your answer, and my next answer is, has the podcast changed the games you enjoy and why you like them? And I've gone in the opposite direction to Sean. I was heavily a Euro gamer originally. I mean, I'd always play a bit of anything, a party game, a filler, thematic game, but more about Euros. Now, the time that I've spent around games for the podcast and the pit stops, because that is more like work and putting a lot of effort into it, when I get my own time to game, I tend now to want more thematic games and more story-driven games that give me those moments and as an escape, rather than doing the brain-burning Euros, because my brain-burning, a lot of it's been done either at work and then in doing all the stuff for the podcast and the videos. So now, right, this is now my downtime. I like to just go down, which is why you'll always hear it mentioned, likes of Eldritch Horror, or maybe a Time Stories or a Sherlock Holmes with the new expansion that came out, something like that. I'm more likely to pull off the shelf. But then when I do pull out a really good Euro, because they're fewer and further between, I tend to enjoy them more. So I'm finding more of a balance again in what I play, but drifting in the opposite direction to the way Sean is.
So the podcast for me, it sounds like I was a complete muppet before, which I was, but it's made me actually take on board other perspectives in terms of, yeah, you know what, I have to judge a game based on perspectives that might not necessarily come naturally to me. So it's made me listen to Ronan sort of delving into the mechanisms of games and finding joy in actual mechanisms rather than, I don't know, the storyline or how beautiful a game looks like. And it's made me really think about that side of things. And let's think about Magic Maze, for instance. I don't like that game in any way, shape or form. It really irritates me. I know. But doing a review on it made me actually think, okay, that's my taste, my personal taste, but is the game good at what it sets out to do?
Yes!
It is. It is very good at what it sets out to do, but I don't personally like what it's setting out to do. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's made me think about the wider audience and what the various tastes are, and that everyone comes at things from different angles.
Okay, so given that our tastes have changed and we're doing things differently, we've been asked here to look through our old episodes and pick two games that you were wrong about or have changed for you in some way. Sean?
Okay, so two slightly different angles to come at this. First, I will say it's going back to one of our treasure hunt episodes, and Ronan already mentioned the one he was most wrong about, and I think the one that I'm most embarrassed about was Legendary Inventors. I defended it. I thought it sounded like a really nice puzzle game. I could see the theme in that there were inventions and all these people were famous inventors, and it is atrocious. It's an awful game that luckily we are not having to review. I did buy it. I quickly offloaded it. And yeah, the inventors have nothing to do with the inventions that are coming through. The inventions are just, it's a case of I need a cube here and a cube there. No thematic tie-in. The game itself is boring. The puzzle isn't very interesting. And yeah, it was an absolute for me in terms of getting that one completely wrong.
From memory, Sean, that was one of those high-pitched moments where I honestly couldn't believe that you were having that game as a treasure. I know I hadn't played it, and there's always room to be wrong, but there was nothing in the rule book that indicated that that was anything other than total nonsense.
I think it might have been rules blindness. I think because you hated it so much, I just got the strop and thought, right, I don't know what happened.
That's usually a good reason for it. Okay. My one I think is going to be a bit more controversial.
Ooh.
Great Western Trail.
Don't you dare.
I've gone off it.
Oh, you're a wrong.
It's just a simple sort of hand management game where you're building a deck and managing your hand. It's too long for what it is. It's too convoluted and it doesn't have enough interaction. It's a decent game. It's not the very good game that I think I probably reviewed it as. And if it wasn't for the fact that Rachel really likes it and that other people ask for it, I would probably get rid of Great Western Trail. It's not good enough, in my personal opinion, to stick around in my collection.
You're wrong. It's a fantastic game. Can't wait for the expansion. It is.
Isn't it like 2.5 hours of just getting 6 cards into a deck and then hoping to get lucky enough to avoid the same colours?
No, you're wrong.
The illusion of different routes. When you land on other people's, it doesn't really make any difference.
It does make a difference because most games tend to be very tight, and landing on other people's stuff, it can tip the balance. Yeah, the collection of the cards is important, but as is progressing on the railway track, and I can't wait for the expansion to come out. I'm beside myself.
Neither can I. It might turn it into a good game again. Sean, your second one.
Okay, so when we first reviewed Love Letter, I likened it to no better than a game of Snap.
A memorable shot. Poor judgment.
Probably egged on by you being a little sausage in the corner, egging me on.
Sausage?
A little sausage. That's a sausage.
You're a funny lad.
I'm so used to calling my son oh, you stop being a sausage. So I'm calling you it now. Love Letter really didn't tickle me from the off. It took ages, and in fact it was watching the interaction between Ronan and his girls as they played it and starting to see those little subtleties in picking out when people were lying and trying to lead you down the garden path. Yeah, there is some luck in it, especially early on, but the more the game goes on, the more you can start to decipher what somebody actually does have in their hand, and it's quite clever, and it's always fun. I think early days I was looking at it thinking, there's nothing to this, but I never didn't have fun. So yeah, Love Letter's one I've completely turned around on, and I really do enjoy it now. I think I've got 2, maybe 3 copies at home now.
Well, I can only welcome you into the light and congratulate you on your somewhat tardy wisdom. For what it does, for the length of the game, it's a very good game, and there is that social interaction which isn't forced in it. I really like it. Okay, my second game is another one that I'm slightly going to slay a big name that I've gone off a bit, and I had so much hope for this, and I've backed it to the hill. Time Stories. At the end of the day, to date, and we haven't finished the Spanish Inquisition theme one, and we've got one more after that, Estrella Drive. We haven't played that one yet, but up to that point, it's a story of unfulfilled promise. The idea of the repetition was novel in the first couple of scenarios. Now it's just, no, I don't want to go through the same rooms again, looking at the same stuff, falsely burning time, just to get to a point where the last quarter of each run, I'm actually discovering new things, which is where the fun of the game is. each game of it or each scenario is front loaded with interest, where you're getting that initial information, and then they've all tended to be a complete straight path to get to the actual final. I know Prophecy of Dragons had some different options, but actually once you got to second half, it was a straight path from there. Again, very front loaded with interest in that one. It wasn't my favourite one anyway. The market in this area has completely changed. Escape room games have come into play, and they have shown how much variety you can have, how you can work puzzles different ways, how you can take a slightly different system and bring innovation to that system. Time Stories has shown zero innovation from its initial high of getting the asylum, having a completely new idea, okay, so what we do with it. There is so much more potential in Time Stories than they are using. It is becoming very, very frustrating. I have these two further scenarios. When we get to the end of Estrella Drive, which is going to be before the end of June, because we're going on a cruise and we're planning to finish it off on that cruise, if it hasn't shown serious innovation in those last two scenarios, I'm going to be done with Time Stories. And that is a surprise to me, because I was on such a high on it to start with.
I'm still really much in the early days of Time Stories. I've only done the very first one that comes in the box and the Marcy case, so I'm still quite enamoured by it. I haven't actually played any of the other escape rooms and like Unlock and what have you.
Unlock I found to be really annoying and rubbish, but Exit the game I really enjoyed.
Exit, okay, so I haven't played Exit or Deathscape or whatever the other ones are, but yeah, I'm still very much looking forward to my next plays of Time Stories. So yeah, maybe I'll get to that point, but not yet.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions coming up here, and again, we're going to be talking about sort of different types of games. It's kind of a theme running through this little section of different sorts of games or changes in taste. And in this case, it's from Keith Shapley, who supplies a couple of questions. Thank you, Keith. Sean, what's the party game you've played that generated the most laughter?
To be honest, I don't really play party games. I don't really know why. I'm always involved in something a bit deeper. I think when I do get that time to play, I want to dive into something that I've been trying to play for ages. So I don't play a lot, but so I'm going to slightly change it. I'm sorry, Keith. I'm going to change it to the game that's generated the most laughter. And for absolutely, it's Eldritch Horror every time. We always talk about our Eastbourne game that when we go down to LobsterCon, and we have an absolutely hilarious time playing Eldritch Horror. But there's one particular game that just stands out in my memory. It was a game that we played around at Steve's, Ronan, and it was the one where you made that dark pact and nothing could go wrong. And
nothing could go wrong.
Nothing could go wrong. And I just remember just looking around. Steve fell off his chair. You were like struggling to breathe. I was in a coughing fit. Just we had so much fun playing that one game, and I think that's what elevated it really from then to be my number one in our recent top 50. So that's the funniest game I've played. I don't really play a lot of party games.
I'm going to take that dark pack because the immediate bonus it will give me next round is going to put us in a really good position, as long as we don't get a red come up in the Mythos phase and I don't roll a 1 on a die. And then I haven't got the one that devours me. Well, those three things that I needed not to go wrong just went wrong. Sorry, lads. Yeah, Eldritch Horror, a total LobsterCon tradition. You weren't there at this last one. We just had, it was continued. It was almost too drunken, Sean. There were cocktails consumed beforehand, and we had a right old time. It was the Devourer of Cities was the baddie, and when San Francisco disappeared and Tokyo disappeared, and we had epic monsters everywhere. It was brutal, this one. My party game with the most laughter is another LobsterCon tradition. It somehow worked out that on a Friday evening at LobsterCon, I run a Dutch auction for games in which lots of games get sold for ridiculously cheap prices. If you don't know what Dutch auction is, you count downwards, so £20, £19, £18, £17, £16, £15. First person to jump in to pay the going amount gets the game. So it's almost a game in itself doing that Dutch auction, but we always follow it with social gaming, and I've been told in no uncertain terms, always mix up the games, try something different. We did a kind of a funny quizzy thing at this LobsterCon, but always we must play Time's Up Title Recall. We play it with all 4 rounds, in which I give them increasing time to do it. And in the first round, Time's Up Title Recall, you get the name of a book or an album or a movie or a person, whatever it might be. You can say whatever you like as long as the word isn't on the card, and the rest of your team have to guess it. In the second round, you can only say one word, but I get 2 people up to do it, and you can start acting things out between you. In the third round, I get 3 people up. You can't speak. You have to act out whatever's on the card. And in the fourth round, I get 4 people up to be statues and create a tableau. And the rest of the team have to close their eyes, open their eyes, and just look at them unmoving in poses to try and work out. And without fail, this creates so much laughter and memory and people with tears in their eyes, and that's why it's constantly requested. So for me, the party game with the most laughter has to be Time's Up Total Recall, another Lobstercon tradition.
An honourable mention, just quickly, Ronan, to Firefly. Especially playing Firefly with you is always a very memorably hilarious experience, because you are the best at Firefly.
I am not the best at Firefly. You can move on now, because that is very traumatic.
It's always so funny. But there you go. So, the next question from Keith, and the last one before we go into the next section, is if you had to play a war game, what would it be?
If you count coin games from GMT as war games, it would be one of those. I almost got in a game of Cuba Libre the other day, but people decided they were too tired in the end, and we didn't know the rules quite well enough. So it would be a coin game. Everyone says to me, the theme of a coin game is more important than which one you choose. They're all different, but they're all kind of the same. Cuba Libre is supposed to be the easiest to learn. It's not the one with the theme that I'm most interested in, but the one I do have with a theme that I've read lots about and I know a bit about, it's certainly no expert, but I know a little bit about it, is Fire in the Lake, the Vietnam-based one. So I would very much like to play that for the theme, for the depth, take time to engage with it properly, play with it with players who know it, that we're learning together, and we can fully understand the repercussions of each other's actions, like any good game that you get to learn and discover. So that, if you count that as a war game. If you don't, I've had Hammer of the Scots, which is an introductory 2-player block war game where you put blocks up like Stratego, where you can see what the blocks represent, but your opponent can't until they encounter them. And I've had that for a long time. It's supposed to be an introductory 2-player block war game. Very much want to play that. Another one that might get taken on the cruise. I don't know that Rachel will enjoy direct war games that much. She tends to be a bit more like you, to like an engine and a Euro and a build-up and have a plan. So we'll see, but one of those two, Sean. For you, any war game tickling your fancy?
Well, I have written down the coin series, Ronan, and it's something that I've kind of looked at in the past, but I don't think they constitute the type of war game that Keith's talking about. Things like Memoir 44, Heroes of Normandy or Normandy, Britannia. We recently played 878 Vikings. I suppose they're war games, and they're not the in-depth war games I think Keith's talking about. There's certainly games that I would like to play. I suppose, the coin series is probably the closest one of that ilk.
Very, very good. Sean, we have got a special guest in the next message.
Yes, we have.
2 bad impressions.
Sean, Ronan, it's Eric Summerer from the Dice Tower, wanting to wish you guys a very splendid episode 100. Congratulations on reaching the milestone. That takes a lot of dedication and stick-to-itiveness. And I really wish you guys the best of luck in your continued endeavors. It was great to see you guys at Essen. I hope that maybe someday we can actually sit down or maybe stand up, shoulder to shoulder, and stand in the booth together again. Anyway, congratulations.
Well, yes, there we go. Eric Summerer from the Dice Tower himself, the voice. Yeah, it was very good to see you at Essen too.
I thought you said I was the voice of gaming.
I didn't say the voice of gaming, did I? I said he's the voice.
Oh, I see. Oh, in which case, carry on.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't do that to you. Yes, so anyway, it was very good to see you in Essen too. We tend to end up with Eric quite often. Whether he's the only person that can suffer us, I don't know, when we do man the Dice Tower booth.
Isn't it that police order? Is there something about that? He's the only one with the patience.
He's the only one that doesn't know about it. Shh.
Right.
I'm not sure stick-to-itiveness is a word, but I'm going to use it in general conversation anyway, Ronan.
What general conversation would you use that word in, Sean?
James, get to bed, and I'll admire your stick-to-itiveness if you don't get up again.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
it didn't quite
He
work.
didn't quite, no. So, anyway, from the worst thing you've ever said to the worst game we have covered, we are going to pick one or more games from our backlog that were so bad they were almost good. Sean, I have plucked for 3 in my villains row of awful games. How many have you got for us?
I have 2, Ronan, so I think you had better start.
Oh, I'll throw in a quick one because it's already been mentioned.
Go on.
And I know I've said it before, but it needs saying here. Galactic Strike Force. Shocking.
It's shocking.
Nothing else needs to be said about that.
That is
Go
a
on, mate.
smelly bag of rubbish.
Fair enough.
Right.
I got a little bit industrial again. Your language is foul today.
It really is. Industrial, yes. Gauntlet of Fools, Ronan. Do you remember that?
You've stolen one of mine.
Ah, brilliant. Good. I'm glad. Yes.
I told you so many times that game was going to be terrible.
I was new to Kickstarter. It was literally the very first thing I ever kickstarted. I was so excited at this idea of Kickstarter. I scoured, and it was a time when there was nothing really great really going on. Nothing that had been released in the last few weeks that was still ongoing. So I just found this one game. It was Donald X. Vaccarino that designed it, wasn't it?
It certainly
He
was.
certainly had his name attached to it, that's right. And it looked a bit ropey, but I thought in my desire to kickstart something, just anything, I just talked myself around.
I thought I'd talked you out of it twice, by the way. Twice I thought I talked you out of pledging for that.
I was so desperate just to kickstart something, though. I just wanted to do it.
Well, then why did you make me play it?
Because I was trying to justify the money I'd spent on
What
this.
have I done to you to deserve that?
It's a game where you handicap yourself by making boasts. So you say, well, I'm going to go into the dungeon with one arm tied behind my back. And someone goes, right, I'm going to do that. Plus, I'm going to do it blindfolded. And then
I'm going to try and not swear while playing Gauntlet of Fools.
That's impossible.
Right.
And then you basically go into a dungeon and it's a push your luck game. And you pretty much always die in the same place. And it's all very boring, very pointless. Creature attacks are zero sum and have just basically, you either die or you don't as soon as that.
Why are you giving this many details about this terrible game?
I'm still trying to justify it, Ronan.
No, just warn people off. You'd be a fool if you were to touch this. Gauntlet of Fools is awful.
It's horrific. Terrible. It's one of the worst games we've covered, or indeed that I've ever played.
Very good. Thank you for that summary.
There you go.
We couldn't. It would be a miss of us to the nth degree to talk about the worst games we've covered and not refer back to one of my personal favourite reviews we've ever done. I decided to jump on my soapbox and stamp my feet full on Tantric.
Harbor. Is it Harbor?
That's all we need to say. Unnecessary, dull, pointless game. Just does not need to exist. Does not need to exist.
But people love it.
Just
I don't understand.
Just terrible. Just nothing. Just endless, boring nonsense, droning on towards a very dull finish. There is no redeeming feature to Harbour apart from the fact it's in a small enough box that if I really try it, I can give it a decent punt far away from me. Johnny Wilkinson's the bejesus out of that box. Goodbye. Don't ever bother me again. Harbour, you are awful.
That was another one I made you play, I think.
You've done some terrible
I
things
have.
to me.
And here's another one.
What is it?
Pack of Heroes, Ronan.
I was thinking about it. So I'm going to be the sniper. And no matter where you go on this little grid of superheroes we've made, I can shoot you.
4x4 grid or a 5x5 grid? That your sniper can shoot like 20 spaces. Yeah, that's going to hit.
I move one towards your sniper. He shoots you. I move one towards your sniper. He shoots you again, you're dead. I'm going to move this one towards your sniper. He shoots you as well. We somewhat have formed a pattern.
You set up your own... Your characters in the grid at the start, and you always just put your sniper in the corner, as far away from everyone else, and you just kill them.
So no range limit on it, and no blocking. So you can't even get one character in the way of another character. It's like, but your massive rock beast is in the way of my pixie. No, sniper can hit you.
And the humorous characters that quickly just became tedious, unbalanced teams, and my... Actually, it's not a good memory because I really did feel embarrassed. I remember trading at one of the early UK Games Expos.
You're a terrible person.
I am a terrible person. I got quite a decent game, and I didn't make it out to be anything than it was. I just put pack of heroes, good condition. So this guy I think he'd offloaded to somebody else because it's a maths trade. Something like quite large, Ticket to Ride size box, and I saw him handing it over, and I've bowled over with this unutterably poo game, and I've handed him this tiny little box, and he just looked at me and looked at the box and looked at me again, and I'm like, yeah, sorry.
As you were looming towards him at 6'6", he was hoping that was just perspective. He's like, oh no, it's a big game in a very big. Oh no, no,
it's actually. And I was just thinking, like, that's disappointing. But when he gets home and plays that
plays
game,
it. Your name is Mud.
God, I almost like shoved 20 quid in the box just to make up for it. Don't worry.
You goram.
God bless him. If you are that person, I'm sorry.
The one thing that makes it possibly worse than Harbour is that it's not big enough to give a decent punt to.
You can give it a little bit of a punt.
It wouldn't be as satisfactory as the fdoof. You'd give one the size of
It's Harbour for doof size.
Yeah, fdoof. I was discussing fdoofs the other day with our old fly half, by the way, on Saturday. But anyway, that's a story for another podcast.
Okay, so we've got some questions from the legend himself, that is Poirier, or P-Dog.
P-Dog.
As we like to refer to him as. And his first question, Ronan, is what's the most surprising aspect of doing the podcast?
Okay, I come up with 4 things, Sean. I'm going to lay them out there for your comments, see what you think.
Go.
I know everyone says it, and I know it shouldn't have been a surprise, but the first thing that I found most surprising was the amount of work it takes to put into a podcast. Now, I personally hate it when people mention how much work it is to do a podcast because, listen, you're choosing to do it. I'm just choosing to listen. Don't burden me with your issues. So I'm going to go for this quickly. Of course we choose to do it, and of course there are rewards to do it, both personal and in developing yourself, and of course we get given games very generously. But it was and is still a surprise, the amount of work that goes into producing content.
Yeah, I've got this on my list, how little time we have in our lives, I've put down. And when we started...
Was that like a deeper sort of thing about how fleeting mortality is?
Maybe. Or it was about how little time we actually have to do things in our little cultural lives. Because when we started, we were still going down to the MMA gym. We were still playing a bit of rugby. We still had other things. I was playing football, and that all very quickly went out the door.
As our waistlines will attest to.
Yeah, as our waistlines will attest to. They all kind of slowly waned as it was like, oh no, I can't do that because we need to record because we've got to get an episode out, and oh no, I can't do that. And yeah, things just get pushed to one side, and that's why we say it quite often is life just takes over sometimes, or we just can't podcast because we've got to do things.
It's gone from being one of our hobbies to our only hobby, pretty much, I would say.
Yeah, it is taking. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we're sounding like we're in misery. Oh, this is a drag.
Totally very rewarding.
Yes.
Wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, for sure.
Absolutely,
for sure.
100%. It's helped us to meet some fantastic friends and some fantastic people and go to fantastic places. And I wouldn't swap it, but it does take up a lot of time. You're absolutely right, Ronan.
Okay, the second thing was an observation, the absolute difference in the US to the UK audience that we have. And we are more UK than most podcasts, being based in the UK, which kind of makes sense, of course. And I'm actually probably more comfortable with the UK audience, again, which makes sense, having lived and grown up in the UK all our lives, that you really don't get much back. And that's okay. I'm not moaning about that either. But UK people, give us a load of questions for the podcast. Oh, really? Go give us questions. With the US audience, engage. I want to be involved, and we'll chat to you. And I'm going on holiday over. Should we meet up and play a game? And it's just one of the ways that you get that is hugely different. You can kind of tell when you're dealing with an email from a US listener to a UK listener. It's just funny to me, and it is a bit surprising the fact that there's this huge difference between the way the two audiences interact with us. Sean, it's just something funny that I've noticed over the years. And like I say, we're also from the UK. We're probably a bit more reserved than US podcasters. We're probably a bit more like, oh yeah, thanks for listening. That's cool. Just quiet in the background. That's fine by us.
Yeah, I think US fans of things are more likely to buy products based on that, like T-shirts and key rings and stuff like that for the Secret Cabal, etc., than UK people are. But I think I've also noticed, and it's been quite surprising, is that in general, and I get this feeling from other people as well, there's not a lot of sort of feedback or fan mail, if you want to call it like that, of coming from the gaming community at all. Because I remember there was a story about the Long View when he was just like, listen, I'm doing this for years, I never get any comeback, nobody ever writes to me, nobody ever answers my questions, nobody ever sends anything into the show, like, should I continue doing this? And then he just got this massive mail, no, we're listening, honestly, we're here, we like it, we just didn't have anything to say or didn't want to say anything. And he was like, oh cool, alright, I'll continue. So I think maybe it's a bit gamer-centric, or...
I don't know, but I mean, podcasting is part of it because you can't get accurate podcasting figures. We could only ever make a best guess.
Yeah, true enough, yeah.
So that a little bit, you're shouting out into the void. Plus, I think about, this podcast I've listened to for literally 10, 15 years. I've never interacted with the creators. I love what they do. But I never sort of go on and tell them I love what they do. So I do always think about that myself. If ever I'm wondering, is anyone out there? Yeah, they are. We're getting downloads. We can see the figures. Thank you. And we don't want you to interact. We don't want you to. Don't feel bad in any way if you don't. I don't. We're doing this and we enjoy it. We can see that people are listening. We presume that you're enjoying it in some way, and that is fantastic to us. But it's just, as you say, something slightly different that I've noticed.
At the same time, if you ever do think, actually, I wouldn't mind writing into that, please feel free. You will get, I guarantee you'll get a personal response from us. I guarantee it. So if you do want to talk to us, we are there for you.
Eventually you'll get a response.
Eventually.
The last 2 months have been particularly bad. So, sorry, Hacken. Okay, my third thing, Sean. Again, it's something maybe you know, but when you actually start interacting it firsthand, it becomes more stark. The variety in publishers and their responses within the industry has been surprising. And then you're realising that some of these are multi-million-pound companies that have got a couple of hundred employees, and some of them is one person working out of their garage. And the size of the company is no indicator on how much they will interact with you as someone who's covering their games. And I don't just mean sending us games. We may have reviewed a game that we bought and we just say, oh, we've reviewed your game, and get zero back. We might review a game and suddenly that publisher is chatting to us, interacting, always wants to talk to us, will send us out all their details, information about games that are coming, will meet us at cons. And the size makes no difference. It's just the people are so different. Now, it's something I think it is going to come up later, but we have never, ever taken money for the podcast. And that's for a very good reason. Because, for example, these last 2 months where nothing's come out, I would feel awful if we were taking money in and then not producing content. And as we said all the way through, that sometimes life's just going to prioritise. When I look at publishers, they are doing it for money. And surely they must have some financial investment in there. And it really baffles me sometimes the way that some of them don't engage at all. So our interactions within the industry, I think I expected a level of engagement and maybe professionalism that is there in the majority of cases and really isn't there in other cases. And that's been a bit... I always still find it puzzling, Sean, that as a publisher, you wouldn't answer an email or wouldn't even have an email address available on the internet for us to be able to contact you about anything, stuff like that.
Yeah, the amount of people that don't have Twitter accounts, like a lot of the German companies don't have Twitter or Instagram, and we love to tweet out when we've played a game or when we reviewed a game. We love to tweet out and give that publisher a little boost or what have you, but sometimes you just can't do it because they don't exist. And yeah, I think it does go down to professionalism, Ronan. I think in this industry, sometimes the mind boggles at the lack of professionalism shown, and given that the money that's involved. And I'm sure if you went into another industry, the movie industry, the computer game industry, or any other industry you could care to mention, that it would be a lot professional, or at least I'm guessing so.
Yeah, and sometimes companies turn up and you know within a couple of months, yeah, they're going to be big. But just by the way they handle it and the way they've got themselves set up, and they just, answer emails, just stuff like. I know we're not always the best at answering emails, but I kind of refer back and go, yeah, but it's not our job. It is someone's job on that publisher's side, Anyway, that was something of a surprise. And the last thing, Sean, and this is a genuine thing that is still a surprise to me, is the size of the audience that we get. I mentioned earlier, we were aiming for 100 at the end of the year. We have a podcast audience somewhere around, per episode, 4,000 or 5,000, something like that. There are 4,000 or 5,000 people that want to listen to our episodes. Honestly, genuinely, still a big surprise to me.
And from all over the world.
Yeah.
Because what Podbean does do quite well. It actually breaks down where the demand for feeds is coming from. And we've got people in Australia, the US, obviously the UK, Germany, India, like Iran. There was a guy that was like, wow, someone in Iran has downloaded our feed. They might not have listened to it, but they've downloaded our feed. That is so cool. It's amazing that my voice is travelling that far. And the rubbish that I have to say is actually going somewhere. So
I presume it's just the state censor, just making sure that you stay off the airways. That's what I would guess in that particular case. But what do I know? Sean, any surprises for you? I've been going on forever about this.
No, you've covered it most. The ease in which the podcast could be set up. Like, just the ease in which you could just say, right, join Podbean, get Audacity, buy a cheap mic, and off you go. And then there was episode number 1. Yes, we edited it to death, and we put a lot of time in post that, but we didn't have to. We could have just gone with what was there, but it would have been rubbish. But the ease of just getting going
still is rubbish.
All right, you got me.
Okay, so this one is a little bit similar, but I've definitely asked it from a different angle. Has podcasting changed the way that you play games, Sean?
Well, it's definitely made me look at games, and I touched on it before, that I wouldn't normally entertain. And sometimes, obviously, we have to play and review games rather than games that we have just bought and feel like playing. So for me, that's the biggest change. For me, is okay, we've been sent this game, we've said we'll review it. I wouldn't normally touch it, but let's give it a go. And sometimes your eyes open, actually, that's pretty decent. And it opens your eyes to that type of game. So that's probably the biggest change for me.
For sure, yeah, definitely exploring different games. We get sent all sorts of different games or get asked to review all sorts of different games, for sure. I am rarely playing to win when we're playing a review game. I'm much more likely to be playing to explore some different way, or I've had a thought about, if I play it that way, what would happen, or I am concentrating on what the other players are doing and how they're winning while I sort of tick along and pay more attention really to how the game as a whole is being played rather than my role in it. I more want to talk through with the other players after that what their experience was, and not just taking on their opinion on the game, which I always listen to, but also aspects of the game. How do you find that was? How do you find doing that was? Or was you setting up your engine easy or hard or whatever? So things like that. And I think the last thing is that I am more likely, and I touched on this earlier again, to do something else to relax rather than game to relax, because gaming is a mini job.
Pretty much. Okay, so in the next section, you'll hear from Huddersfield's finest first.
Patrick Stewart. Sean, make it so.
Make it so. And we'll see you there.
Hello, my name's Dan Hughes, and I'm from the Dice Tower. You might have seen me on Board Game Blender or Board Game Breakfast, along with my daughter Cora. And also, I'm from the comedy board gaming panel show podcast, This Game is Broken. But I'm not here to talk about me, although that's a very fascinating topic. I'm here to talk about the Game Pit podcast, which, according to their calculations, which are pretty dubious, but still, it's their podcast, is 100 episodes long. Now, I've been a fan of the Game Pit for quite a long time now, and of particular use to me is the absolutely invaluable support they give me during Essen. The past 2 years, Essen has been made so much easier by listening to the traps and treasures of their recommendations. And one of the things that I find absolutely invaluable is their ability to read rulebooks, so I don't have to, summarise the kind of general rules and general feel of a game, and then kind of present them to the audience. Now, I don't always agree with them, their opinion of whether it is a trap or treasure, But it certainly gives me food for thought, and it also raises up various games that I might not have considered otherwise. And if they did only the Essen shows alone, I would be a dedicated listener. But there's so much more. So, happy 100th episode birthday, and here's to 100 more.
Well, Mr. Dan Hughes, thank you. I think, even though we're wrong, but you still use us like a tool or something. Goodness me. Dan's supposed to be coming on the show at some point, isn't he, Sean? Wasn't I supposed to arrange that?
Probably, yeah. Dan
Okay.
and possibly Matthew.
Yeah. Yeah, I should probably get on with doing that. We'll see them at the UK Games Expo.
It's only taken us 3 months to do episode 100, so...
3 months? Who are you trying to kid? These messages were recorded about 8 months ago, you lazy son of a... Right, anyway.
To be fair, just before we move on, I am a big fan of Dan's show. This game is broken.
Oh, yeah, that needs more publicity, doesn't it?
Yeah. A nomination for Podcast on the Year, Board Game Geek. Yeah, that needs a lot more publicity. But yes, it is. It's very good, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So
I refuse to listen to such filth.
So, Dan... All I can say is I don't need any more Huddersfield timeline cards, okay? I've got enough.
Neither you nor the world. Right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks at the Game Expo, Dan, and we shall manhandle you there. Sean, time to get round to our last question for us, and then a couple more questions before we're going to do what we haven't mentioned before. Our first episode came up in 2013. We're going to do a top 10 2013 soon. So let's get on with finishing off these final bits. And this says pick one moment or episode that you've enjoyed from the previous 99 plus, we'll put a plus there, episodes. Just to fit the way I've done it all the way through, I've chosen 3.
Well, I've chosen 1.
Okay. Let's go for your good one before my bad 3.
Mine was episode 27, and I held this back off on the worst games because for this section specifically, because I really enjoyed our review of Dungeon Roll. Another game that I got all hyped up about and backed on Kickstarter, made you play, and then we just tore to pieces in the review. I think we both got on our soapbox about it. It was very funny. I think it was probably us at our mediocre best. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed episode 27.
Just another rant.
Another rant. So we just went into one, and it was very funny.
I'm starting to feel like you deliberately make me play these terrible games that you've backed just to see if you can get me wound up.
Move on.
Okay, very good. So my 3, quickly. One of the ones that I don't think got that much attention because it's a slight crossover, but we did one of our pit fights where we get games that have all got a common theme or mechanism or whatever, and it was about Dungeons and Dragons games. And we were looking through looking at the likes of obviously the adventure system, but we pulled in other games that weren't necessarily Dungeons and Dragons because we didn't feel there was a game that encompassed D&D that well, and we talked about a wild ranging load of different games that cover different aspects of what we like within D&D, and I just think that we did that episode really well. We both knew the games very well we were talking about, and I just really enjoy recording and even listening back to the episode. And I don't often enjoy listening back to our episodes.
Yeah, I do remember. I think we need to do more pit fights. I think they were a particular favourite of us recording because they were always games that we were very familiar with and quite passionate about. So, and they tend to be the better episodes when we are really familiar with things. So yeah, good choice.
Thank you very much. I've already mentioned it. My second one was just recording with Mark Johnson. That was sort of a personal moment for me.
Boring.
What?
Move on.
You called him Mark boring?
No, I'm calling you boring.
Oh, that's true. And my third one was, and it was something where we tried something a bit different. It certainly wasn't 100% successful. There was a lot of effort went into it, but it was our battle report for Virgin Queen, where I went round and taught 5 different people the learning game of Virgin Queen, taking 2.5 hours each. And then we sat down all day and played it, and we recorded bits between each turn for each of the 6 people playing. And we had some overall thoughts before and after. And it wasn't 100% success in what we set out to do, but I really like that we just tried something different and tried a different format. I like us trying different formats, and I like that was completely different and out of our comfort zone, and we made something of a success out of it, something a little bit unique there. So there you go.
I think it was our attempt at doing sort of like a Dice Tower live playthrough, that kind of thing.
I don't think I've heard anyone else try and do exactly this, whereby a live playthrough would be different, where you're talking through each move and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. This was, we're trying to capture the essence in snippets as well as providing a background and a summary.
It was our version. That's what I was saying. It was different, but it was our kind of way of doing that, catching it in those snippets. And I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed actually the episode. Not necessarily the game, because if I remember, I felt a bit out of it in the actual game itself. But yeah,
But because you were the Ottomans and you refused to attack.
I did attack, and I got soundly beaten and spent the rest of the game trying to build up my forces again. The Ottomans are excluded from half the game. Half the fun is like getting your relationships and marrying off your pairs and working out that side of the game, and they're excluded from it.
Yeah, you had to bring military force to bear one. Anyway, those are my 3 highlights. So we'll move on to, again, a couple more questions. We've got Nathan and Terry here, friends of ours who have been on as special Essen reporters and in end-of-year shows at various times. So, coming from Nathan, your best game pimping tips, or why do you not like pimping games, Sean?
I have recently pimped out my copy of Orleans.
How did you pimp it out?
I basically copied the deluxe version. So the deluxe version has metal coins, and I bought the upgrade pack from DLP, but I bought bags from ArtsCal. Now, what you get on ArtsCal, you can go in, you can design your own little cloth bags for games, or there's hundreds of designs already done by the BGG community, and you just click on the link on the geek list, and you go in and you print off, and they takes a couple of weeks to come, but they really look nice in games. I've just done one for Sagrada. Stuffed Fables, I've made a little bag for the dice in that, and Orleans I did. Each player has got their own colour bag.
You are obsessed with those little bags.
I am, but I think they really look nice in games. And metal coins, finding miniatures that match, like Nathan himself, he had another game when he bought Imperial Assault that had the exact same miniatures, but they were all painted, so he just transferred them in and they look amazing. Game trays, like there's this new fad for game trays where you just like the overlays, and so that keeps all the components. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like pimping out games, Ronan.
Yeah, and I'm entirely not fussed at all. It's just, why do you not like pimping games? Don't know. You're asking me to explain a negative. I save my money for actual games.
You are a miserable curmudgeon.
Could be that too. The one thing you will find, what I consider to be pimping a game, is you will find a lot of Universal Head rule summaries, or from other people, but no one else is consistently as good as Universal Head is. Player aids, rule summaries, things to help you actually play the game and make the teaching, learning, and playing smoother. That's the sort of pimping that I can fully get behind,
yes,
as opposed to having nicer coins. I think making the experience better is better than just...
Yeah, I agree. I've recently bought a laminator as well, Ronan, so... I've been laminating some player aids.
It really doesn't cost much. It's like $2 a month. But one of the very few things I do crowdfund or Patreon, whatever, is the Universal Head Esoteric Order of Gaming, because they are nearly everything that he's done I've got somewhere in a game box, and it makes those complex games so much smoother to play that it's totally, for me, worth that appreciation.
Preach. Okay, so Nathan now wants us to have a cheating in games and takesy backsies discussion. Off we go, Ronan.
Everyone cheats unknowingly in games.
Yes, agreed.
You sometimes forget to pay, take too much, double take your resources, whatever it might be. Everyone sometimes get things wrong, and sometimes you catch yourself, and sometimes you don't catch yourself, and sometimes you sit there going, I shouldn't have this much money, or sometimes I don't have as much money as I should. And then later on, someone might go, didn't you buy that's where that, I've got extra money. Or it happens. And to be honest, I'm never that fussed. It's one of the reasons that I avoid competition games, is because it's such a toxic atmosphere around simple mistakes like that. So cheating is always going to happen, but I wouldn't call it cheating. We're going to call those inadvertent mistakes. My general stance in it tends to be, I'll call you out if I happen to see you cheating, and that will make me sad if I ever have to do that. But I'm not watching other people. I'm just trusting you. And if there's a game where stuff happens behind the screen and we just have to trust that, I just don't even give it a second thought. I presume the people I'm playing with are playing in the right spirit until they prove otherwise. And honestly, very, very few have ever had to. Someone had to get spoken to about this at London on Board the other day, and it's such a toxic thing to have to deal with and so uncomfortable. You're there to have fun. You're there to have fun with and for other people. Why would you do such a thing? How could winning be that important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I cheat all the time. Nathan, actually, yeah, absolutely. Nathan, who asked the question, I was playing Ollie on with him, and I was taking 6 or 7 out of the bag at a time, and at the end of the game, they were like, "Oh, how did you win?" And I was like, "Well, I bumped up my..." Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't bump up my knight that far. Sorry, I've been cheating the whole way through.
Total pez finger.
I know. But if it's like, you see in BGG forums where people write in and say, "Listen, I've got a friend or a part of our gaming group and they cheat, they openly cheat, we've spotted them, but we don't want to say anything," that's just the wrong thing to do. If you see someone cheat, it's going to just ruin your experience every time you play with that person until it's addressed. Yeah, it's going to be a difficult conversation, but you address it with them, and either they take it on board and say, "I'm sorry, that was a stupid thing to do," or they go away. But it makes your experience better because you don't want to be playing with somebody who's actively cheating. Now, takesy backsies is a different thing. It must be decided by the group, because you can't have a table where someone's placed, "Oh, hang on. I've just put that worker there, but I really meant to put it over there. Does anyone mind?" If you've got one person who minds, then it doesn't happen, in my book. If the table agree, and I always agree, I've got no problem with it, because people make mistakes. They're thinking 2 steps ahead, and they're putting down a worker in the place they're thinking 2 steps ahead, and they go, "Oh, hang on, no, I actually meant to go there." Fine. If the game hasn't progressed too far, if it's not going to cause a massive load of people taking back things and putting money back and putting produce back, then fine, do it. But if one person objects, in my rule, then that it stays there.
So we tend to agree on a takesy-backsy policy, game by game.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a game in which you could spend so long doing takesy-backsies and it unravels so much stuff that sometimes we just go, there are 0 takesy-backsies, especially in a learning game. 0 takesy-backsies. Let's just play the game, get through it, learn it, and then we'll worry about it next time. There are some games where we set a limit on the number of takesy-backsies you can take because it's so complex that we presume everyone is going to have a big, huge mistake at some point and say, "Oh, I've done that wrong. Can I please take it back?" Yeah, that's your one for the game. Cool. You're talking about amongst friends here. I did one the other day. I played Lorenzo with the expansion. My first turn went so poorly that I said, I need to do a huge takesy-backsy here. You can see I've clearly taken the wrong card. I have all the bits for the other card. No one's bought that other card. It's right at the end of the round. I'm going to takesy-backsy it, but I accept that I'm going to have a massive asterisk and I can't win this game. But otherwise I'm going to be sitting here for an hour and a half having 0 fun because I've missed a link in my engine and I'm just going to get nowhere. And everyone was cool with it. I came 3rd out of 4 anyway, so it really made no difference. But that sort of thing, okay, as long as everyone agrees to it. I'll tell you the times when I'm not so good on takesy-backsies. Firstly, if there's new information revealed. Someone does something, you flick a card, and suddenly they go, "Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that, I meant to do that." You've seen the card, you've seen the next turn, there's been new information revealed. No way, you cannot take that back. But mostly, I'll be less likely to let you take a takesy-backsy if you've been flipping slow for the whole game. Because you're wasting my time as it is, and now you want to waste more of our time doing takesy-backsy. And if I think you haven't been thinking about your turn when it's not your turn, and suddenly it comes to you and you start going, right, yeah, I'll just do this, and then it occurs to you a minute later, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." Well, do you know what? That minute of thinking, you had the time to do it. So do it in between turns, and then you won't even need to do the takesy-backsy. So if you're slow, I'll get stroppy about takesy-backsies.
You're a mean spirit.
Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm just, especially I say slow play drives me crazy. I'm just like, no, mate, no, it took you this long to take 1 go. You can't take 2.
Okay, right. Do you want to lead us into Terry's questions, Ronan?
Has doing the podcast increased or decreased your enjoyment of attending game events such as Essen, UK Games Expo, etc.?
This was a very, very good question from Terry because it was very close to our heart. So we have recently made a huge conscious effort to scale back what we were doing at Essen, at the UK Games Expo, because it was actually ruining the shows to a large degree for us. We were so busy. I went to Essen.
For you.
For me. I went to Essen 2 years ago. I was collecting things for Ronan. I was collecting things for myself. I was collecting things for Steve. I had loads of publishers to run around, collect games off that they had offered us. I had people to meet, and I didn't sit down and play a game for myself or at all, even in the 2 days I was at Essen. And it's too much. I want to go to a games expo or an Essen, and I want to sit down. I want to try new games. I want things to catch my eye. So for me, I think I'm going to concentrate on fewer games so I can have that depth of review anyway and enjoy my time at those conventions more. And I think that's the way forward for me.
So I have a different perspective on it because I quite like to be task orientated, and going there with a list of things to do and having a schedule quite often makes it more enjoyable for me. I'm like, right, great, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I want to go there, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to go there, I want to do this. At the last Essen, I think I drove Sean absolutely crazy because he was trying to relax and see a couple of games and chill out. And I was like, I'm going here, I'm going there, I've got an appointment at 1, I've got an appointment at 2, and we kind of split up. And that probably is the best way for us to work on the days that I've sort of set aside for doing podcast work, if you like, Sean. Right, it's cool. I'll just whiz around and do all these things, and that makes me happy. And I get a sense of achievement and accomplishment.
Yeah, but even you pushed it too far.
I did, yeah.
You'd have an appointment in Hall 1 at 1 o'clock,
yeah,
which lasts for 20 minutes, and an appointment in Hall 7 for like 1:15.
Yeah.
Unless you've got the thing that Hermione Granger had, the old time thing in Harry Potter.
Do you mean the time turner, Muggle?
The time turner, indeed. Unless you've got that, you ain't going to get to them.
Yeah, but I got to plenty of them. Let's not worry about that. In fact, what they did the last Essen was create such a workload for after Essen that it was a burden, and we do have to scale back and just go, it's not realistic for us to cover that amount of games. And we kind of temper what we pull in terms of work to what we create. What I think that it was too much last Essen, and I need to get the balances that then also I also enjoy meeting new people, connecting with people, sharing creators' work, getting to understand a bit more of the process, and having the time to actually do that. And I think it's a balance whereby I'm definitely will be spending some days doing the worky appointment thing, buzzing around, getting all that stuff done, but still making sure I allot some time for the more relaxed, allowing yourself to discover things that you didn't know about and actually enjoy the show for itself as well. So I think it's still an issue that we're balancing out. But for me, it has definitely overall increased my enjoyment being part of the podcast and being more involved in it rather than, I say, just being a visitor, but, just being a visitor.
I think once we reach that balance, it will increase my enjoyment. But yeah, the balance has been tipped a little bit in the last couple, but we'll get there. Okay, so Terry's second question and our last question of the episode is, have you ever flipped the table, or what's the closest you have come to flipping the table?
So, in general, what I'll say is that I tend to take co-ops more seriously than I do competitive games. I said it before, I don't that often play to win. So I am more likely to be grumpy and in a bit of a strop in a co-op game. And people like to be, we've lost it. Oh, God. Or why did you make that move? Oh, that was so clearly like, we need you to do this, to set that up, to do this. And that's where I can be a bit of a pain in the bum gaming on occasion in co-ops. Don't think I've ever got to the point of flipping the table in terms of one of those. The closest I can ever think of doing it is on the multiple times that Sean has beaten me on a end of game hidden scoring card, because he is consistently better at scoring end of game cards than I am. I think, and he's probably way past me now, but I used to be better at end turn big scoring, where I'd set things up and on the final turn all the plans come to fruition. Here you go.
No, you're still the master of that. Coming from last to first. Last to first all the time is so frustrating.
Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. Okay, mind you, I front ran Lords of Waterdeep the other day and got told off for that as well.
You get told off for it. It was a done deal. And you were trying to make it out like half the board away from us. Like, no, still tight.
Still tight. Don't want a mandatory quest. Still tight. Don't get your mandatory quest yourselves. That's fine, everyone. But But yeah, Sean, I know going into the final endgame score of this hidden scoring cards, he is likely to propel himself past me. And that is possibly where at least the game's over. I'll be close to flipping a board in his direction and littering him in gaming components.
I've never ever come close to flipping a table. I lose my rag about once a year, and it's usually at Ronan.
Once a year at me? Come on.
No, properly, like...
Give me more credit than that.
I get miffed at you more than once a year, but you properly lose the rag and, like, actually throwing buildings at you and stuff, that's once a year.
It's all part of the fun.
I think the only things that really annoy me are, like, people's manners annoy me sometimes, if they're talking over rules, explanations, or not paying attention. The thing Rona said as well, not prepared for your turn. Things like that irritate me. There's certain types of games I get quite frustrated at, like Magic Maze I mentioned before, Escape. It kind of irritates me, that kind of real time. You have to have everyone together and it's all quite manic and people are looking at you to do things and you don't know what to do. That kind of irritates me, but I've never come close to flipping a table.
Yeah, well, we're usually quite calm. What I think for people who have never played with us before, especially if they only know us through the podcast, when they start playing with us, I think they might be quite surprised at the amount of foul-mouthed abuse that just gets thrown backwards and forwards between us constantly. And then it kind of surprises them because they expect that we're in a mood with each other and we're entirely not. It's just after 39 years of being best friends and cousins, that's pretty much how we interact. That just gets thrown. But every now and then I do catch people looking at us sort of agog, open mouth, like, what did you just call him? I've never heard anyone called that in any circumstances in my life. No, he's all right. He just is one, that's all. But anyway, okay, brings us to the end of all the questions and all the retrospectives, apart from our final segment, which is going to be our top 10s of 2013, looking back to the game, some of the games we covered back then, and what has stood the test of time and what has not.
Ronan mentioned, we are now going to do our top 10s from 2013 when the Game Pits first started, and after that we're going to do a little comparison because I've done my research, and in episode 17 we did a review of 2013 and we did a top 3 at the end of that, so let's see if that's changed at all. But Ronan, do you want to start us off with your number 10 from 2013?
Well, that number 3 is going to be a little bit of a surprise. My number 10 was originally published in 2013, but I don't think was necessarily available to us in 2013. It's the 2-player card game from Emperor S4, Hanamakoji, in which you're playing from a limited hand of cards. You've got 4 actions each round, and you need to choose an action, and in some way it's going to make you lay cards on a row of geishas on your own side, attempting to have the majority of each colour of cards for the geishas in order to win a certain amount in order to win the game. Fantastically tight, brilliant, fantastic decisions, very small package, 20 minutes of good, groany, mental wrestling. Sean?
Yeah, it was alright.
Wrong. Your number 10.
It was fine. My number 10 is Coconuts, where you're literally sitting with a plastic monkey who is going to flip little brown coconuts into beakers. If you manage to get it into the beaker, you claim that beaker for yourself. A lot of fun. Boy loves it. Adults love it. Yeah, Coconuts is my number 10.
It's quite funny. It's not top 10 material.
Shut up.
This
Get
didn't
out.
come close. All right. Number 9, however, is a fantastic family game, albeit for slightly older than Coconuts. It's Mysterium. First came out from the Ukraine and has made its way across. Has now got a different set of rules in English, although I almost entirely play with the original set of rules. They've supported it with 2 expansions. It's where, a bit like Dixit, where you're getting cards from one person who's the ghost, and you're trying to work out which clue they're trying to point you towards of a set of weapons and locations of people from these sort of abstracty, surrealist sort of dream cards that they've given to you. A twist on Dixit, a slightly more gamely version, like I say, the newer English rules, adding a load of nonsense and bluffing and guessing if someone's right, takes away a lot of the co-op aspect of it. I really don't like them. They're completely unnecessary. Play by the original rules, just simplifies it, makes it more fun. A very strong family game that's constantly getting requested. Mysterium.
Yeah, Mysterium's been a bit hit and miss for me. I think it's very group dependent. When it goes well, it's very good, and it doesn't go well, it's a bit draggy. But yeah, cool. My number 9 is Nations. We talked about Poirier stuffing his pants into it earlier, and here it is. It's the Civ building game with a slight bit of difference. It's more of an economy sort of a card game rather than the sprawling games like Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilization, but very much in my wheelhouse, very much a game that I enjoy. And I know you do too, Brendan.
I am reserving judgment on Nations. So I'll move on to my number 8, which is another Civilization era spanning game, which does things slightly differently. Probably only this like now because I haven't played it as often as I should have, and it's Patch History, which was a bit of an indie cultish sort of a hit in Essen a few years ago. It's where you're building a layer upon layer of cards that have different places for you to place resources on, and you can get different personalities from that time that give you special powers. You can trade with each other, you can go to war, so there's a slight geographical aspect as to where the players are sitting. Plays very differently to most other games. And a very strong game, again, one that's a little bit obtuse to get into, but once you get into it, you can start to see the pattern of it, and a very strong Civ game with a different twist. Patch History, my number 8 from 2013.
Yeah, it was one of my also-rans. It very nearly got in there, and I think I just ruled it out because I hadn't played it really enough, and it hadn't got to the table in the last probably couple of years. But yeah, I really do enjoy Patch History. My number 8 is Viticulture. Just game about making wine and selling wine. A very good worker placement game, particularly with the Tuscany expansion, which really sort of fleshed it out and made it a lot more enjoyable. It was a slow burner for me, Viticulture, but once it got there, it stuck.
There's a bunch of games come out about making wine, and I'd say it's one of the most off-putting themes to me. I just can't see anything interesting in it at all. Viticulture, however, is a very good light medium sort of a Euro. Couple of issues here and there. If it wasn't perfect, Tuscany polished it up a little bit. I like it. It was a nearly top 10 one for me, mate.
Cool.
Speaking of Euros, number 7 is Russian Railroads. One of the things I love about it is quite thinky, but there's a pattern to it. It doesn't hang around for too long. Works fantastically well as a quick 2-player game. There's German railroads and American railroads out, which adds different options and different maps. It's a system that for me has stood the test of time, and one that has a little niche in my heart. My number 7 is Russian Railroad, sure.
I can't remember exactly why, but I really didn't take to this game. I think it was quite dry. I think maybe I got absolutely spanked a few times, but I really didn't enjoy the 2 or 3 games I played of Russian Railroad, so it kind of just fell by the wayside for me.
Well, you've had 100 plus episodes of being wrong. Let's not change that now. Your number 7?
My number 7 is one we played fairly recently, Ronan. We dug it up, and it's Francis Drake. I really enjoyed this game. It looks absolutely stunning, and the hidden sort of targets and trying to get that set collection going, and it just even the movement mechanism when you're collecting things is quite interesting. Yeah, it's a strong game still for me, Francis Drake.
I'm going to turn into Tom Vassell here, Sean. That was my number 11. He says that to every top 10 they do. He's always got a number 11, and this genuinely was my number 11. This was a hard one to leave out. Very much enjoy a game of Francis Drake. I don't think it's got unlimited replayability, that's all. That's probably what held it back a tiny bit.
Fair enough. Okay, Ronan, you're number 6.
Do you know what has got unlimited replayability, but probably not best played with an incredible lack of sleep very early morning in an airport? And that's the 2-player chess-ish game, The Duke. You're right. You did not have a good introduction to this game, but it is fantastic. I continue 5 years later to bang its drum and big it up. It's a brilliant 2-player game. My number 6 is The Duke.
You know what? I'll just play chess, thanks.
Badly.
My number 6 is a game that I completely dismissed because I thought it looked ugly at Essen 2013. And it's a Amerigo, the Stefan Feld game with the cube tower, where it's completely dependent on what cubes drop. Then you choose your action selection, you're gathering resources, moving on, taking over island building on islands, etc. I've thoroughly enjoyed this one now, Ronan. Since I played it, since I bought it, we've played it, we've reviewed it. It got a quite positive review from us. So Amerigo has really shot up the ranks, Ronan.
I like it. It's a good game. I'll say there's slightly too few dead turns in which the cubes come out in a certain way, especially getting towards the end when your options are limited or what you actually want to do. When you look at it and you go, well, we're all going to do the same thing this time. Let's just do it quick and drop some more cubes and move on. So that's what stops it from being a top game, but it is still a good game. That was a decent choice.
Okay.
It's like 2-player heaven for me in this top 10. So I've got another one at number 5, another one with a slightly odd theme. Slightly odd gameplay. It's the asymmetrical cooperative, The Ravens of Three Sashiri. Sean loves to bang on about it whenever I mention it, which is quite often. It's about the lady who's escaped from a house of pleasure and has gone into a coma from the trauma because her best friend died, releasing her. And you are her time-traveling detective friend who's attempting to put together her shattered psyche before the world-eating ravens can destroy everything, and she ends up dying. And in terms of gameplay, it is played in silence, in which one player is drawing cards and laying them out, and the other player is the comatose young lady attempting to convey a pattern of cards that's required by removing cards from the other pattern that is being created by the other player. Very different to any other game I've ever played. The unique, marvellous The Ravens of Three Sashiri.
Yeah. Mental theme. Sounds irritating. Pass. I'm being quite miserable.
Wrong.
A lot of people read it. Loads of people go on
Total
about
wrong.
this. I do every now and again claim that I'm going to play this, but I can't get past it. I can't get my head around it, so not for me. But my number 5 is a straight up, I don't want to say bog standard because it's my number 5 from 2013, but it hits that mould of Euro right in the middle of Euro. It's Rococo. It's the game where you're the master dress builder and you're making dresses and outfits for the hoi polloi in France, I think. I can't remember where it is. But,
Definitely in France.
It's definitely in France.
Yeah.
And a bit of action selection going on, bit of economy going on, bit of hand management and deck building going on. Lots of things that I love. I just think it's a very, very solid, well manufactured Euro game, and that's why it's my number 5, Rococo.
Yeah, another contender. I know already that I don't like it as much as you do. Possibly slightly down the Great Western Trail path off. You're doing a lot for not that much coming out at the end. But that's maybe sounding more negative than I am towards the game. A top 15er of 2013 for me. Number 4, like many of these games, is a game I have harped on about, and it is Theseus, the 2 to 4 player puzzly, battle-y, science fiction themed game from Michael Orash, in which you take the place of a faction, which is a set of cards, and you'll move the Mancala style around a space station with different sectors in it. When you go to different sectors, you may trigger traps or attack other people or get your own cards into play, and you might play as a faction that wants to gather data. You might be an all-out attack faction. You might be a balance between the two. You might be marines that are using guns, or aliens that are crawling through the walls, or robots that are using the space station itself to attack you. It's got lots of variety. It's thinky, but it's fun. It's thematic. It's combative. It is another one that's slightly different to other games I've played, and that is Theseus, my number 4 from 2013.
Well, I definitely avoided games of this for a long, long time, and quite recently, Ronan, you finally cornered me, slapped me across the head with the box. We played it, and you know what? I enjoyed it. It was a good game. Maybe if I had a few more games under my belt, it might creep into my sort of top 15. But yeah, good choice.
Thank you very much, Sean. Your number 4?
My number 4, Ronan, it just shows you what a strong year it is that this is my number 4. Is Concordia. It's a game I thoroughly enjoy. Yeah, it's quite dry, but the deck building aspect and the hand management aspect and the cleverness of it just sings to me. I really, really enjoy this game as Concordia.
I totally missed that Concordia is a 2013 game.
I've probably messed that up, but yeah.
No, I just checked. It is a
Oh, did
2013
you?
game.
Okay. Thank God for that.
Totally missed that entirely. I don't.
Yeah.
I
You're a bad
can only
person.
say my entire top 10 is null and void. Wow. Where would that go? It's going to be a top 5 somewhere. That's a 3.5, should we call it?
Yeah, it's got to be.
Oh, I can't. How did I miss that? Well, Egypt. Really good game, as you can tell by my shock that I completely missed it out. Yeah, love it. Really good Euro game that's slightly different, spatial aspect. It is slightly interactive that you drive prices up by going certain places. Works with different player counts of different maps. Just, yeah, very strong. Great choice.
Your number 3, Ronan?
My number 3 was your number 9, Sean, and it's our very first crossover, if you don't count Concordia, and it's Nations. Yeah, it's the Civ card game. We've reviewed it. We've done a pit fight with it. We've done all sorts. Still very good. Nations the Dice game is a decent little game as well. The expansions help both of them. And again, another one that's slightly different. You have to think in a slightly different way. When you're building your nation, nothing is permanent, and you're deciding all the time. You can slightly change the balance of what you've done by taking a different advisor or by changing up one card to another. You're never stuck down a certain path. So I really like Nations for the flexibility you can have as well as having an overall strategy.
Yeah, it's a very, very good game. My number 3 is Dungeon Command. Now, this was right up there in my top 50 of all time, like number 1 or 2 for a long, long time. I really enjoy this game. It's a very clever combat skirmish miniatures game. Always has a tight finish, always has those moments that you talk about afterwards. Oh, I've just done that. Oh, I can't believe that character didn't die, and I can't believe that happened. Just, yeah, very clever system. Doesn't get the love it deserves, in my opinion. That's Dungeon Command.
Yeah, a game that I enjoy. Never had the love that Sean had for it, but very much enjoy the games of it. But not an area of gaming that I particularly love, tactical miniature fighting on a map game, but a very good sort of entry into there. If you were thinking of looking at stuff like, I don't know, Malifaux or Age of Sigmar, where it's probably a bit deeper, this might be one you can start off with because it's been simplified for you. It's much more card driven, however. Slightly different, but yeah, a very good game, Sean. Again, another good choice. My number 2 is a co-op that I've always loved. Pretty sure Sean hasn't got it in his top 10. It's Forbidden Desert, the much tougher sequel to Forbidden Island, about attempting to find your crashed airship in a desert while a storm rages and you're constantly being drained of water. Requires real team play from the different players and the different roles, and communication and a bit of luck and management of that changing storm and knowing when and where to use the special equipment, when to take shelter. A real challenge of a co-op, and I really do enjoy a difficult co-op. So this sings to me from my wheelhouse, Sean. Number 2, Forbidden Desert.
Yeah, it's a very good game. Forbidden Island was something that I have good memories of playing around at your house with the girls, and I've got it in waiting for James when he's old enough to really kind of grasp it. And yeah, Forbidden Desert was a step up from that. I haven't really played it that much, so I couldn't really say it's in my top anything, really. I think I've played once or twice, but yeah, certainly a good game. And my number 2 is Firefly. I banged on about this. I've had my arguments with people about Firefly. Yes, it's nonsense. Yes, there's not that many tight mechanics in it, but for an enjoyable experience that does reflect the TV series and give you the feel for the TV series, I think it's second to none. It's absolutely hilarious. I mentioned before, especially playing with Ronan, I love a pick up and deliver game anyway, and Firefly is my favourite of that type. So yeah, love the TV show, love the game. Firefly.
It's fun, and I love the theme, but I can't claim that it's a great game. But it is a lot of fun, so I have rated it quite highly because of the experience.
Fair enough. Right, Ronan, your number 1.
Is your number 1?
It is.
I don't think we need to talk about it for too long. It was already been mentioned 4 or 5 times in the episode. Sean, is Eldritch Horror.
It is Eldritch Horror, yes, of course.
Marvellous game.
My number 1 of all time, so of course it's my number 1 in 2013. So.
And in my top 10. You know we love it. We won't talk about it anymore. Just a brilliant, fun, thematic, tough co-op that has got obviously so many options now with so many expansions, and we have them all and we play it regularly, and just a really fantastic game that made our vault recently, so you know all about it.
Right, should we go back to 2013 and do this comparison, Ronan?
Go for it.
Right, so your number 3 was Lewis and Clark.
Oh, good game. Haven't played it in a long time. Definitely faded out of rotation.
Yeah, it was definitely a game that you were very excited about at the time. I think it's probably lasted a bit longer in my household because Natalie's a big fan of it, and we played it quite recently, and I really enjoy it. It is probably a top 15, but yeah, not quite.
I could see that making a comeback if I was to get it out.
My number 3 I thought would be in your top 10 this time round. But I don't think you've played it enough. Is Invaders?
Yeah, that'll be an issue of not having played it enough. I keep meaning to. Got the new expansion that came out in Essen 2017. It's supposed to be being covered in my 2-player episode with Rachel. Good game. Very good game.
You're number 2, and you have matched it exactly this time round, Ronan, is Forbidden Desert.
Nice. Classic.
Well done. Well done. My number 2, I have not matched, because it is nowhere near my top 10. It's Rampage or Terror in Legal City, as they ridiculously named it. I still have fun with this because my boy loves it. It's just a silly fun, especially for a child. But yeah, the novelty wore off after a little while for me with Rampage. It was fun for while it lasted, though.
Yeah, nothing really to it, mate.
No. And your number 1, Ronan, was the Duke.
Number 6 now. Yeah, I can see it.
He's still hanging around. I know you've always been a big fan. At that time, you were properly into it. So, yeah.
I probably just had more plays in at the time, and it's kind of hard to get people to play it. I've played it with Rachel, but because I knew it a bit, I think I beat her a couple of times. It might have been a mistake. And it's not really, again, really her style. It's... anyway.
And my number 1 was the only one that features in my top 10 now is Francis Drake.
Yeah, again, good solid game. My number 11. Well, number 12 if you bring Concordia into it, but who's counting?
You muppet. Can't believe you did that.
Right, Sean, we'll see everyone for the outro next.
Okay, there we have it. A rather long episode 100. Long in arriving and long in the making. So, yeah, keeping the theme there, Ronan.
And why not? It's been a long journey. Thank you so much to everyone who's been on it with us, whether you join us in episode 1, God help you, or in episode 100 and whatever in between. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all your support, all your downloads, all your listens. You make this a very satisfying and fun thing for us to do. Please join us for the next 100 and whatever episodes, or however many we decide to make, sure.
However many, indeed. So things coming up, as we said, we do have a few reviews lined up. We do have the big review of 2017 yet to come, and Ronan has got his 2-player extravaganza with Rachel coming up.
Oh, that might be next. It might not.
It might be.
I've got a solo game, one in the works, where we're going to be covering Spirit Island, Dragonfire, Runes of Thunder, Hero Realms solo mode. There's other stuff, Arkham Noir and Seventh Continent, talking about it as a solo experience. There's that coming up. Plus, we're supposed to have guests on, but again, it's all been knocked sideways by all the stuff we talked about at the beginning of the episode. Also, a point of business, we ran a giveaway for the Brazilian issue of Coup. We're aware there is a winner. We didn't necessarily want to roll it into this one because it's such a long episode. So in the next episode, we will announce the winner and we'll get that in the post to you. Apologies for whoever wins the draw because we haven't done it yet, and apologies to everyone else for not announcing it. Like I say, it's been a bit hectic the past few weeks. We're getting back on track. Thank you for your patience, and we have got more games and expansions lined up as giveaways coming up in the next few weeks, so do tune in.
Very good, and as always, we are very proud members of the Dice Tower Network. Go there and to the Dice Tower itself for gaming goodness galore. If you wish to download the episodes, we're on Podbean, iTunes and Stitcher. We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. Pop along there. It's one of the best places for us to interact with you. If you wish to email us, we are thegamepitpodcast@gmail.com. We have social media. We've got a Twitter account @GamePitPodcast. We have a Facebook account, and we have a fully functional Instagram account, thanks to Natalie and occasionally myself. And we also have our YouTube channel. Please go there for a continuation, hopefully soon, of our pit stop videos. Thank you so much for listening. Music by E. Aaron. Boys celebrate episode 100, boy.